I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the City Council's Finance Subcommittee. My name is Joe McGiverin. I am the chair. To my left is our vice chair, Peter Tallman. To my immediate right, City Councilor at Large, Mike Sullivan. To his right, City Councilor Ward 3, Dave Bartley. We are joined with us, City Councilor at Large, Terrence Murphy, and our Ward 5 City Councilor, Linda Bacon. What's that? Well, you were just talking to me about the diet that you were going on. Our Ward 2 City Councilor, Terrence Murphy. My apologies, Terrence. We got a number of items on the agenda. The schools will be showing up at about 7 o'clock for anybody that's interested. Before that, we're going to get this agenda done. So with that, can we go to item number 1? Motion making second to take off the table. This is, all these orders are filed under the chair of the Finances Committee's name. This is in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53. The City Council accepts the Nature Conservancy matching funds for the fiscal 2020 EE Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness I can't talk this evening, grant, and authorizes the establishment of a fund for the appropriation of said money and use of said money. Under discussion, this is the $25,000 under the Nature Conservancy that was not allocated, but promised for the matching part of a grant that we accepted earlier in the year. The grant was under the Economic Development Planning Department, Commonwealth's $25,000 would equal the city's match. Is there any discussion? Is there anybody here to discuss the grant? Chair will entertain a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt the grant.
Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Councilor Barley?
Yeah, just remind me, this is a supplement, what now? I don't have my notes.
Earlier, sorry, I was trying to find the name of the grant. Earlier this year, we had the Planning Economic Development, I believe, in before us. They received a substantial grant. I don't have the notes in front of me, but it was for the impervious surfing, mapping, and resilience planning implementation. And we adopted it subject to, in that presentation, we learned that the Nature Conservancy was going to provide $25,000, which would be used for the city's matching portion of this grant. This is the $25,000 that we said we didn't think we could accept without being presented to us through proper channels with the signature of the mayor, signed off by the auditor, and voted upon by the city council. So we asked for that. It came in on February 18th. Put it into committee, and we're suggesting that if we do adopt it, that we refer it back to committee to allow us to accept the bigger grant also.
And this is just, there's no match, correct?
This is the match for the other grant.
This is the match. Oh, okay, this is.
But there's no match for the other match.
You know what? I think you put that perfectly, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, motion to accept.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Motion to take item number 2 off the table for discussion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53, the City Council hereby accepts the provisions of the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program Municipal, known as the MRP, grant and authorize the establishment of a fund and or other method appropriate for the accounting of receipts, expenditures, and all resources associated with it. Motion to take off the table for discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So moved. Do we have anybody here from the city to speak on this? Our Michael Bloomberg from the mayor's office?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, this is a grant that comes through DPW. It's available to all DPWs in the Commonwealth. It's dividends related for recycling related. In the past, I know this grant has been used for offsetting the costs of mattress collection and things of that nature. It's a, in general, relatively small fund to the I believe less than $10,000 that comes in and is earmarks for things that are waste and recycling related. That's the extent I know.
The total grant is $1,500.
Yeah, it sounds about right. It's a general small sum.
And this, I'm from historical knowledge, I don't believe there's any match to it.
No, that I know.
And who's the grantor?
It should be under the Department
Department
of
of
Public Works.
Environmental Protection,
Oh, Commonwealth?
Commonwealth,
Yeah.
yes. The, this is, this money, if we do accept, needs to be, and I'm sure it will be quickly spent by the end of the fiscal year, by June 30th, 2020.
Motion to approve, accept.
Motion made second
Second.
to accept, adopt. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number 3.
Motion to take item number 3 off the
Second.
table for discussion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Filed under my name, this is a request for a transfer from the stabilization fund, $35,358.01. And this would go into sick leave buyback in the fire department, same amount of money. It's been initialed by the mayor for the recommended passage by the city council, received by the city council on February 18th, and referred to this committee as standard. On the motion, is there any, I believe our chief of the fire department is with us, and he has gone last on this agenda for his first 3 inaugural runs, so he's going to get in and get out real quick, Jeff, right? Jeff, can you just, I know it's buybacks, but can you just explain who it's for and?
Right. Thanks for having me tonight. This is in regard to Chief Pond's, a portion of Chief Pond's contractual buyback. As you know, the buyback there's 2 portions of it. There's a vacation day buyback and there's a sick leave buyback that he gets at retirement. We have taken care of the vacation day buyback internally within the budget. The sick time 150 buyback, which is a portion of the buyback also. We were requesting 50% to be paid for out of stabilization from this meeting, and then we will budget for the next 50% in the FY21 budget.
And Chief, when you said this is part of the buyback, part of it was done within the budget, is there still a balance owed, and when would that be expected?
His sick leave, or his vacation day buyback's been paid out. That's already been done. The only remaining balance for him going forward is the sick leave portion. So it'll be this 50% that we're talking about tonight, and the 50% in FY21.
Okay. And the reason for the 50% for next year's budget would be
The chief requested it to be broken up in half
to help out the city?
to help out the city, correct?
Tell the chief we said thank you. We appreciate that.
I will, thank you.
Is there any further discussion or any questions? Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, Chief, can you tell me, why wasn't this in the budget already?
I asked the same question, Counselor. I went back, I investigated the past budgets, and I did come up with the budget that was submitted back when the budget cycle started last year. And the chief did, in his original submission, ask for 4 retirements in the budget, and somewhere along the line, they were cut. So,
So,
Cut by the city council.
somewhere along the line.
Well, I'd want to see that verified.
Yeah, I
Mr.
don't
Chairman.
know. I don't know who
I
cut.
don't want to just say
Well,
that.
I'm not, this is our new chief. I'm not going to, put him on the spot.
Well,
But
Mr. Chairman, it could have been cut by the mayor.
what's that?
It could have been cut by the mayor before it came to us. He might have put that in a budget, it might have come back, might have been presented to us, already cut by the mayor. So let's not assume it was cut by the council. I'd want that verified.
That's correct. I don't know who cut.
Right, right. So yeah, I just want to verify that for the record.
For the record, we'll get it verified, but it's quite simple. It's not in the budget if the mayor doesn't approve it. So if it's cut before, at the fire department's request, that would be something that the mayor would do with the fire department. But we will verify it.
It was cut by the mayor.
It was cut by the mayor.
Thank you.
Councilor Bartley, Councilor Murphy has given you the verification. Anything else, chief?
so
That's all I have. Do you have any other questions? I'm more than willing to answer anything you have.
I think Counselor Sullivan might have one.
Well, my point would be exactly where I think Councilor Bartley was heading with this. The whole $70,000 should be in next year's budget. The mayor knew, he knew that Chief Pond was retiring, yet he chose to take the buyback amount out of the budget, knowing full well that he was going to be retiring.
I don't know what the mayor's thought process was. I have no idea.
I'm not asking you to look into any crystal balls here. I'm just saying, now to come 3 months before the end of the year and take it out of stabilization. You know, I can't vote for that. I'd prefer just to see the whole thing, work the budget, and get the whole thing in where it should have been right along, and have it budgeted for next year.
Chief, is the chief's salary by contract?
Yes, it is.
Is this part of the contract?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Here will be Counselor Bartley.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
It was a nice ceremony.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to see your mother there, too.
Yes, it was
I
nice.
just, yeah, that's pretty cool. I haven't seen her in a while. Actually, I saw her that morning when we talked about it. Sorry, 3 hours before that. So, Chief, so this represents 1/2 of the vacation buyback that is contractually obligated.
The sick leave 150.
So, I'm sorry, sick leave. What's the vacation buyback?
The vacation day buyback entails vacation days that he's accumulated in his contract, along with personal days.
All right, what was that amount?
The combined cost combined is $18,828.76. That was paid for out of the fire department budget.
Actually, reflecting about some of the other vacation buybacks, actually seems pretty reasonable.
It was
When
pretty,
I'm,
yeah.
reflecting about it, I mean, I remember one about 8 years ago, it was about $300,000 in another department, but it was a pretty significant buyback. Those were good old days, weren't they? And just a point of order to the chair. I think I know the answer to this, Joe. But can we amend this amount on the? I'm not saying I want to, but are we allowed to amend this amount or not?
We cannot amend any
okay.
appropriation.
Right. I didn't think so.
Presented by the mayor and
Okay.
signed by the mayor.
All right.
You can vote up or down.
Yeah, that was a point of order. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that was the case. Normally I would absolutely oppose this coming out of stabilization, Jeff. Really inappropriate. But seeing how this is cut by room one for whatever reason, so was, it was improper budget by the mayor. I mean, the mayor knew this was happening. We all knew this was happening. Because the chief had announced way prior that he was. So normally I would never make a vote for appropriation out of stabilization for this. I think this is an extenuating circumstance, however, because the chief did try to put it in the budget. The mayor, unbeknownst, so just a process for the public, but you already know this. So you present to the mayor. The mayor can make whatever cuts he wants, and ultimately, 45 days before the end of the fiscal year, the mayor by law has to get us a budget. We don't know what's presented. We city councilors and the public really don't know what's presented to the mayor by the department heads. We never see that. Right. I mean, and so that's and the mayor's, I mean, listen, I'm not knocking the mayor. He's in a tough position generally because those requests come in way too high, and so the mayor's always in a tough spot. This being an exception because the mayor knew this is happening, and so I do want to at least say that in the chief's defense, it's contractually obligated. We all know this. It's just a budgeting thing that's bothersome to me and Mike apparently as well. And I agree with Mike truthfully. In this case, I will vote for this. I'm grateful that the chief at least gave us some kind of flexibility. I'm disappointed in how the budget, again, with that caveat that the mayor's under a lot of pressure to do budgeting. I understand that. So, but now that you're here, hopefully we can tighten some things up as we move forward, Chief. Thank you.
Counselor Murphy.
Yeah, just two questions. And I also have some reservations about the stabilization fund, and I'm wondering, is this, we deducting this from our $750,000 part of the stabilization? I'm assuming we are, so
That would be correct.
this was
We-
not part of our original thought. But just a couple of thoughts. Vacation personnel buyback, Chief, you were funded for $225,000. So are we able to take that money out of that line item for the chief's vacation buyback? Or are we transferring it from somewhere else? Do you know?
His buyback was a combination of existing funds that were remaining in the vacation day buyback.
Yep.
And then 13,735 that was remaining in the SIC 150.
Okay, so we took some of the sick to pay for the vacation.
Correct.
All right, so we didn't have enough in the vacation account either.
Correct.
All right, and now we're, okay. And just, and again, budgets are not easy, and obviously we have some tight times, but just in fiscal 18, we spent $338,000 on sick leave buyback for firefighters, and in the first 6 months of last year, we spent $237,000, and the request was for $600,000, and we got $325,000. So, I mean, clearly, it would appear that we need to be a little more realistic in our budgeting, because we knew they were coming, and clearly the previous chief, knew that they were coming. So, thank you.
Councilor Bartley.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just looking at the chief, the mayor's, well, we got a whole series of supplemental budgets, so I'm just going to look at the one here, the first one. And there's not in here, so it's not even a supplemental budget. So there's all sorts of wish list things, for lack of a better phrase, on this. That's supplemental A. Sorry, folks, for the delay, but this is what was submitted to us, so we have to play the cards we have. Supplemental B, not there. Supplemental C. Supplemental C. Not there either. So supplemental A, B, and C, not there for the chief. I'm not really sure what's happening with this. So so this is one of those where if we didn't have a negative $464,000 in free cash, that's a negative free cash. That's a lot of factors go into that, and we go over this multiple times. But normally this would have been a free cash type of expenditure, and I think we would have sailed it right through. But in this day and age, it's a tough situation. So I just wanted, for the record, not in any of the multiple supplemental budgets that I reviewed and that we all received as counselors and voted on December 17th, not even in there, to the best of my review. Thank you.
This is again a request from the stabilization account, which we part of the $750,000 of extra growth we found, and the DOR allowed us to use it because the DOR used $1.7 million of free cash from last year for this year without coming to the city council. An answer which we will get next week when the DOR comes in to see us. Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah. Chief, how many years of sick leave buyback does this represent?
It's accumulated over his entire career.
His entire career?
Correct.
So, to put it in next year's budget, it's his entire career, but to wait another 120 days, it just seems to me that that's not asking too much.
These things are all contractual, Counselor.
I'm not suggesting we violate any contracts. It's just on what date the check gets cut.
I can tell you that I've put the other 50% in the FY21 budget.
How much, question for the chair, there's not 750,000 left in stabilization. How much do we have left?
451, Mike.
451?
There's at least one item which will be increasing that number that we're going to dispose of this evening, and that would be the school resource officer, I believe.
I don't think it'll increase the number, though. It just won't decrease it.
Joe, point of order?
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, it won't, Joe. So that, the 451 is, that's where it is. That's without the 118. Come on.
Any other discussion? The chair will be voting in favor of this. It's a contractual obligation. I note the concerns about the budget process and the lack of knowing this at the beginning of the year. There are a number of sick leave buybacks that we do throughout the year where intended retirements don't go forward. And we've often, maybe not this year, as I will stand corrected, cut this line item in the budget knowing that until the actual person retires, it's not due. The chief, at the request of the city, said he will take half of it, this year. The current chief worked it out within the budget, part of it, and deferred the rest of what's owed to him at this point in time, which he could choose to require by law. He could choose to require it be paid out immediately. So I think the chief has met the city halfway, and I appreciate that, and we'll be voting in favor of this. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
Motion carries 3-1. Thanks, chief.
You got a counselor out here. Libby's here, Hernandez, just in the audience. Libby?
Yeah.
Want to announce it? She's over here. Libby Hernandez. Okay.
We've also been joined by Counselor Libby Hernandez from Ward 4. She didn't get the memo about, the bar, and only in the courthouse do non-attorneys have to sit on the other side of the bar.
Come on in.
Libby, it's your choice. I think I'd rather sit with Dennis too than, I better not go any further with that one. Just kidding.
Motion to take item number 4 off the table for discussion.
So moved. All those in favor? Any opposed? This is a request for a transfer, which is for 2 line items coming from our repair and maintenance sewers, $1,500, advertising $500 for a total of $2,000, going into retirement benefits. The retirement benefits are to pay the portion from the wastewater treatment plant fiscal 20 pension appropriation for the retirement board. Off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. I'm looking to see if our superintendent or engineer has showed up yet. I don't see them. I have a feeling they might have mistaken the time of the start of the meeting, so, I mean, on the surface, I could answer questions, but I don't think I can answer all questions. Want to table it and see if they show up?
Yeah, motion to
Motion to
table.
lay on the table to see if DPW shows up in a little bit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Motion to take item number 5 off the table for discussion.
Motion made second to take item number 5 off the table. Discussion is made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This was before us, sent to the city council with a recommendation, and then sent back to the committee for further discussion. It's a request of $50,000 from stabilization to the special revenue account of $50,000. The special revenue account is found in the police department, and it deals with a special, I'm not sure if it's a reserve fund or a received fund of monies coming in. On the motion to take it up for discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Anybody wish to discuss this, chief?
I think the chief and I, we can.
Okay, why don't you come on in? To update both everybody here present and anybody that's listening on from our TV audience, could you just give us a little history of where this money is being proposed to go to and why?
So I'm just going to clarify the financial part on behalf of the city auditor. So this request is related to a system that was put in place by HPD, which I will let the police chief share, but this is a system that helps process auxiliary police and other outside contracts and services that HPD provides. we are collecting revenue, and I just got the latest figures to the tune of about $108,000. Now, in previous years, and when this was set up, it was suggested that that revenue would go straight to HPD and be allocatable by HPD. Part of our financial audits using outside auditors and bringing in DOR to establish best practices for finance in the city have suggested that that's not how we should be doing that. All that revenue has been now and is going to continue to go into the general fund. So while the request is for stabilization, from stabilization, it's because HPD was counting on having that revenue for this fiscal year, but actually greater than $50,000. It looks like it's going to be even now up over $108,000, and that's just through this point in the fiscal year. That's money that'll be in the general fund in the form of free cash. So this is we're requesting that this be allocated out of stabilization, but I'm just sharing that it's revenue that's coming into the city, and I'll let the chief explain and answer any questions related to the actual system.
On the
and where
revenue
money comes
side,
from.
Michael, just to be clear, we're all on the same page, this is revenue paid for private jobs, correct?
Chief.
Right, this is outside road details.
Okay, so before we get to your chief, what has that got to do with the city budget?
Because the revenue is taken in by HPD, in previous years it was suggested that that would just be HPD revenue and that they could spend it as they wish. But our outside auditors are suggesting that any revenue that is collected by HPD is the entirety of belongs to the city, and so they don't have access to these funds. They're not able. They're able to collect the revenue, but they're not actually able to use it to pay their officers, pay for the detail, pay for the system in which is in place to collect the revenue, unless we appropriate it.
Well, I understand that.
Yep.
But the point is, that doesn't answer the question. It should not be in the city budget, and we've gone through this over and over again. The reserves used to be able to bill and did bill for when they worked private jobs and got paid accordingly. Police officers, the courtesy was the police department would receive the money, pay the officers for the private jobs. That was fine. But when we said we don't want the liability and the loop of bringing the money into the budget.
This isn't revenue from auxiliary police officers.
Some of it is.
Yeah, some of it is. Just say I wasn't prepared. I didn't know this was on the agenda tonight, so I wasn't prepared properly to speak about all of it. But this is just, I think Tanya's requiring any revenues being brought in. This is a new thing. It's just something we just started this year, and it involves any outside road job details. It does bring in, I think, would you say $108,000? It's something new we're trying. It seems to be good revenue source. I'm a little confused as to why it can't just, why it's revenue and has to go into the general fund. I don't understand that. I wish Tanya was here, but she's not. So I don't really have a lot of answers for that, but I do know that it is good. It is generating money, no matter where it goes. The $50,000 I think is coming over to actually pay for the system and maintenance itself. I mean, it's a contractual thing. Like we'd have to come up with that money to pay for the system somehow. So.
The system, the software.
Yeah, the detail tracking system. It's called the DTS system. I think the $50,000 is for that. Like I said, I didn't know this was on the agenda tonight. It's a little surprise for me.
Well, if we're paying for a system that allows private jobs to be paid for, I think that maybe should be billed to the private contractors.
Yeah, I'm not the best person right now to explain this because I
Well, the best person right now is texting me, and I don't know what he's texting me, but,
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Sergeant Hart.
Oh, yeah, he is the guy. Tell him to come over.
Councilor Barley.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to, I'm not telling you your business, but I mean, that's an open meeting law deal there for us, text messages. So we really can't be getting text messages relative to what's, and dealing with text messages. I'm just,
The open meeting law involves elected officials. This is information coming from for the use of a discussion in an open meeting.
Mr. Chairman, you can do it what you may. I'm just throwing it out there. I think open meeting law is pretty clear that we're not supposed to be getting text messages relative to ongoing topics within an open meeting. But hey, that's all good. The 108,000, Chief, thanks for being here. Mike, the 108,000, do we have it?
So, again, I'm speaking on behalf of Tanya, but this is revenue that comes in, it's in the general fund, but we wouldn't be able to access it until next fiscal year. So it's in an account, but I don't believe we can appropriate out of it. That's, again,
You're just a
that's my
messenger,
understanding.
and we're not here to
Yeah.
shoot you or anybody.
Let's do it.
No, everybody's respected here tremendously.
But this is, yes, sir, this is revenue up to date that's been taken in for this.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's being said here, if you had said to me this, we can access $108,000, and we will make a financial transfer into stabilization of $108,000, and you document that, then if you come to at least me, I would say, okay, the revenue's been collected from the various vendors for whom the police have provided services. We put those funds, $108,000, we have it wherever it is, in general fund, or in this case, a stabilization. Then I would feel comfortable taking $50,000 from that pre-received amount and dispersing that how the executive branch feels is appropriate. But what you're saying to me is that we received $108,000 and somehow it's in our general fund, and this is the first time I've ever heard that we can't access funds that are already in a general fund. That's a brand new situation, and I've only been here 8+ years, so I don't have the legs under me the other counselors do, but that's new to me, that when funds are in a general fund, that the city of Holyoke is restricted from use thereof. So I don't like this, and I think Councilor McGiverin raises an outstanding point, which is to say these are private jobs, private road jobs with City of Holyoke employees. Then again, I heard what you said for the DOR recommendation, that the fund shouldn't go to HPD, the fund should go to general fund by DOR recommendation. One way or the other, either if the funds go to HPD, Holyoke resources are going to be used to disperse those funds. So whether it's from HPD or whether it's from the city treasurer. So although I agree completely with Councilor McGiverin on this 100%, this cannot be a unique situation, no, because every single municipality in the Commonwealth has road detail jobs. This has to be done over and over. So hopefully there's a process and procedure in place in the other 350 cities and towns, and we can figure out a best practice.
Just to that, yeah, then that process and procedure will be in place for next fiscal year, which is requesting with the expected revenues that we can project the revenues that we'll get for the next year, we can request the funds that'll be necessary to pay for the DTS system. That's what we would do for fiscal 21. This is an attempt to remedy fiscal 20 because that's not how it was set up for fiscal 20.
Okay, I heard that about the system, but are we going to have the process and procedure in place to collect the funds from the vendors and that sort of, to make sure, sorry, Chief, did you?
No, that's all right. I was just gonna let you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chief.
Sorry, I was gonna let you know that
Chief, I
Sergeant
wasn't-
Hart was en route to answer all your questions. He's the best guy to answer those questions.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
No worries.
You just waved.
I defer to Sergeant Hart.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'll go back to chair. I don't know if Sergeant Hart wants to make a statement, or Mr. Chairman, or
So,
'cause I have additional questions, but I don't know if you want to, I guess we have to hear from Sergeant Hart first.
Sergeant Hart is here. Sergeant Hart, welcome. Would you like to explain the $50,000 request?
Sure. I think the chief's correct, so that's supposed to pay for the DTS system that we have in place. However, this fund and these revenues are to pay back the off-duty line item that was in deficit for the road jobs. So I know you're familiar with that. We've had several discussions about that.
Well,
So we implemented this 10% fee to offset that that line item. And I think there's 106 in there from the police department, and I think another 8,000,
Another 18, I think.
18 from the auxiliaries. So we generated approximately $125,000 since we implemented this 10% fee, which is to offset the off-duty line item, which eventually will be in the black. But it was our intention to have a portion of that to help pay for the system itself, which frees up an officer to be on the road opposed to being stuck in the office, answering calls, calling up vendors and the such. So it's a lot cheaper to have that DTS system in place than it is to have an officer in that position.
Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, thank you, Sergeant, for being here. So just, so the 50,000 is to pay for the DTS, or the 50,000 is to, that's what the 50,000 for?
Correct.
Okay. And so your argument is that instead of having an officer chasing the vendors, that the city of Holyoke should pay for a software system? Is that?
Pretty much that's the cost right now, just for the whole setup fee and everything else. Next year, it'll be less than the 50,000. I don't know the cost exactly offhand.
Could I just jump in for a second? It's not the city of Holyoke's not paying for it. The 10% fee, if I heard the sergeant correctly, pays for it. We've already generated through that 10% fee paid by the vendors.
Vendors, correct.
Yeah, so we already generated 125,000. We just want to access 50,000 of that to pay for the system itself, and there's still plenty of revenue left over for others. The city's not paying for it. The vendors are paying for it with a 10% fee.
Okay, well, to me, that's very helpful, Chief. Thank you for that, and thank you, Sergeant. My only problem is, we just heard from Mike that it's in a general fund and we can't access it.
Well, that's where all revenue goes, and
No, I get it.
I heard Mike, so all the revenue that the police department generates, we can't touch, and we never were able to touch, and we never did touch to use at our disposal. So you see in our budget, after the expense side, you'll see the line items for revenues. And in those line items, those are revenues generated by the police department, but those go into the general fund.
Yeah, Sergeant, I have no idea, I have no, strike that, I have no doubt that you're on point on this. In this case, however, I'm not gonna vote for taking $50,000 from stabilization when we have funds already sitting there, and I know darn well this stabilization is not gonna get reimbursed, and we're gonna have other costs that are gonna, in my opinion, are gonna be to get us through the fiscal year, that might be a touch more important than this. But that's just my take, Sergeant.
Yeah,
So-
it might not go directly into stabilization, but it'll go directly into free cash for next year, once it's certified.
All right, thanks, Sergeant.
Councilor Bacon?
Thank you, Mr. President. So my recollection was that the fix for this was going to be that the vendors would be paying ahead so that we would not be running a deficit in these outside job accounts, because the whole point was so that our officers would be paid timely. But the historic problem that we thought we fixed about 4 years ago was that the fees were not and have not been collected, and that continues to be the problem. So my understanding was the fix was going to be that when somebody wants a off-city road job, the vendor's going to be required to pay upfront. So we will have the money before the work is done, and we will have the money to pay the officer.
That's the first I've heard of that, and we've had several discussions on this as to whose responsibility it is to retrieve the funds from those vendors, from the jobs. So if a vendor, let's say for example, is an error of $50,000 that they owe for police details, and we see them out on the road doing road work, how did they get that contract? How did the city give them a contract to go out and work in the city if they're in arrears? How are they able to put in for those and apply for and bid on road work if they're in arrears in the city?
So through the chair, if I may.
Councilor Bacon?
If we have no control over this account and it's for work that has nothing to do with the city directly. It's private jobs. I don't think the taxpayers should have to be underwriting it. I think we either need to fix it and have accountability within the city, and the easiest way to do that is have the people pay up front. I mean, who's billing them for the road jobs now?
This is the fix, the DTS system, and the 10% fee that we installed is the fix. We're already, we just started probably 6 months, and we already generated $125,000. Within another year, we'll be in the black, and then that'll be just be more revenue that's gonna be generated for the city, and we won't be in the red. So it won't be any taxpayer liability.
So I'm just not hearing the answer to
Chief, did you,
who's doing the
Yeah, I
billing
think-
and
I think
who's following up on the billing.
I think the
We're
chief
just,
wanted to
we're
answer.
we're just pulling in two different directions here. The, Councilor Vacan's talking about an issue from years ago where we had, definitely had, vendors that were way off in the rears and we fell behind and we've made a lot of headway into reducing and chasing down the vendors that didn't pay. And I believe Kate McCoy does that, our payroll lady, she's doing a great job. And I think we're a much, much better place, in a much better place than we were. I mean, I think it's an impossible task to get, it would never be the fix to get vendors to pay ahead, because a lot of times they don't know that they're going out and there's emergency road things that are happening. This is a win. This DTS system is not that, but it is a great partner to that in a way, because the DTS system, it's a 10% fee. It's a win-win. It's not funded by the taxpayers. We're in a little bit of an early pickle here trying to get it started, but it's going to be a win-win moving forward. In next year's budget, I'll have a line item for $50,000 to pay for the DTS system, and then it'll just be, you'll know that at least 125 is coming in, so you'll always be making money in the general fund. Am I correct, John, with that?
Correct.
So I don't want to pull too far in different directions. This is a win-win. It's not a taxpayer funded anything. It's a win, and it's just a fee that's tacked on, and it's if we shut it down, it's just giving money back. I mean, just throwing money away.
When, I know you haven't got.
I
the
want to
answer.
understand if the 50,000 is a one-time thing for the system or if it's an annual thing, because I'm hearing they're going to pay it now and then they're putting it in the budget for next year.
It's an annual thing, but the reason we need it now is because Tanya says we can't access it through the general fund to pay for the system, which was what we intended to do. But next year, it'll be paying ahead as far as it'll be in the budget. You'll know, okay, here's the line item. What's it going to pay for? The DTS system, what is it? We explain it just like this, and you know that it's already we already have proof that it generated. By then, I don't know, it's going to generate more than $125,000 in a year, depending upon how many 10% fees there are. So it's just a good thing.
And my last question through the chair, is it procedurally possible that if this money comes out of stabilization, but double the money is available in the city coffers, that the stabilization fund would be reimbursed in the next budget for this 50,000, which is an advance, if you will?
I'm okay with it if it's, I have no idea whether that's procedurally allowable, but
Well,
that's the intention
It
of
would
this.
take an appropriation into stabilization from next year's funds,
I'll put it in the budget.
okay, which theoretically will be, well, there's something that is just not making sense.
Thank you.
Good questions, and quite frankly, I agree with Councilor Bacon on a number of items here. We did think we resolved this 4 years ago, not just about paying in advance, but that we wiped out a deficit, and we helped wipe out the deficit, and we made it clear we didn't want to see any more deficits for private jobs. And the accountability is not in front of us, that, deficit comes in different forms. Paying police officers who do their jobs, paying reserve officers, paying auxiliary who do the jobs in advance before the money comes in is a deficit that can be corrected. The other deficit, which was part of the problem, is the contractor never paid the money. Some contractors never paid the money. And quite frankly, John, that's a good point. So what has the police department done to notify the individual departments that their contractor has not paid the money for the police work?
Well, we're on top of them. We give them notices every 2 weeks, and in fact, Councilor Vicken, we do have some vendors that are on the list that must prepay before we hire officers, just because of that fact. So if we run into those problems, then that's how we address it. If not, then we'll have a sergeant go out on the road and shut that vendor down.
The money that's been received to date this year, and the numbers are correct, from what the auditor told me this afternoon, is the $106,000 plus the $18,000. Is that generated just by the 10%?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's not the actual monies. The actual monies that are coming in
Split up.
are put into, is there a revolving fund?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Now, the revolving fund
off-duty line
is called the special revenue fund?
I think it's the off-duty line item. It's called
Okay.
off-duty.
What is the special revenue fund?
Whatever fund that Tanya set up to take in this $50,000 to then pay for the DTS system.
This sounds to me like a capital expenditure. This is not a capital code or a capital object number for the money going into. You know, there's a difference between paying out salaries, but this is not the line item. I'm just asking a question more than stating, but it doesn't look like it's the correct item in the budget, if it belongs in the budget, which I still don't think it does. The city should not be chasing contractors. I mean, I have no problem paying police officers, reserves, and auxiliary in a timely fashion, and over the years, the police department has done that with and without headaches. We understand that. But this takes it a whole different step. I wasn't in favor of the revolving fund. I think I voted against it, but I don't remember. And regardless, you know, this is just going to cause more problems, in my humble opinion, as to what should be done separate from city business. And if any police officer does private work and on city time gets to correct something that's a private job, that's a management problem. No police officer should be on, when they're being paid to perform services of the city of Holyoke, they should not be there trying to correct their pay with a private contractor.
Now I'm confused as to.
I heard Sergeant Hart said that, exactly.
Sergeant Hart, clarify what you're talking about.
What-
I don't know what he's talking about.
You said that to keep police officers from spending time, you know, in the police department on trying to figure out.
I can clarify
Yeah.
that. Now I know what you're talking about. What he's talking about is for many years, for the 25 years and beyond that I've been on the police department, we've had a detail officer, an officer that sits there and he manages the details that come in. That's just the way it's been done for 1,000 years. What he's saying is the DTS system is basically removing that officer, allowing him to go on the street, and using a good use of modern technology to actually fill those jobs for it. It takes like maybe 10% of that officer's time. So I think we're getting a little sidetracked and confused, but that's what it is. We can take that detail officer who was a full-time detail officer and have him manage this DTS system at 10% of the time. So 90% of his time, we can use him in another capacity, doing something else. That's what we're talking about. Now, there's no mismanagement on that. That's actually good management.
I respectfully disagree from what I heard from what Sergeant Hart said, and John, I know what you said.
Yeah, basically, just like the chief said, we've had an officer, a patrol officer, working as the detail officer. That was his job.
You said officers.
Well, after retirements, we've had different officers assigned to that post.
I'll
or
stand corrected,
that duty.
and I apologize, but that's what I heard.
Okay. So we clear now?
And we're on one good page here, the money coming in and confusion. There's a lot of confusion here. Any other discussion? Counselor Sullivan?
I don't mean to put the treasurer on the spot, but Sandy, could we waive our rules to allow me to ask the treasurer a question?
Sandy is an elected official.
She's not here.
She's not here.
Not here.
That's not Sandy.
That's not sad.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Put his last name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's-
Oh, sorry. All right. Well,
Any further
is there,
discussion?
can, either the chair or can somebody explain to me, Mike, I don't understand why we cannot access the general fund, but we can access the stabilization fund.
I can clarify that. Any revenue that's generated during the fiscal year cannot be utilized until the following fiscal year when it's certified.
So normally we would budget ahead of time with the projected revenues. This year, when this system was put in place, that wasn't done. It wasn't part of the fiscal '20 budget. So when the chief's suggestion is that for next fiscal year, the expenses related to this will be budgeted. But since this was implemented in the middle of the year, that's why there's the request to pay for this system. So, but I agree. I mean, when I first heard it, that was the first question that came out of my mouth to the city auditor is, hey, if we got the money and the money's coming in. But to what Sergeant Hart said, and from the explanation I got from the auditor, is that any revenues that come in through the year are not accessible until the next fiscal year.
All right, but the other thing I also heard, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that the 50,000 would be in next year's budget, but I also heard that it wouldn't cost 50,000 next year. That it would be a greatly reduced price, that this was a one-time thing.
Okay, I'll defer to Sergeant Hart. I believe it was gonna cost 50,000. That's the system annual maintenance cost, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's all based on the amount of officers that are gonna have access to it. So it could change every year, but I'm pretty certain that it won't exceed $50,000.
So, okay, so, but it's gonna cost us $50,000 a year to free up one officer.
It's gonna cost you $50,000 a year to generate $125,000 a year. So, I mean,
No, not to generate the 125, to track the 125.
No, sir, the 125 is the fee, the 10% fee. So it's actually a greater than $1 million. So the request is the system is going to generate approximately $125,000 in revenue and cost $50,000 to run. So I think that was one of the early pieces of confusion, was that the 125 is not the total sum that we're taking, and that's the 10%.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that Mike?
Yep.
Counselor Reagan?
Thank you. So at this time, is the revolving fund paying for all the special jobs and all the expenses are covered, so we're not running any deficits in that account?
Yes. That revolving fund, with this 10%, that revolving fund will always be in the black, always.
Right, but you're talking about the 10% being in the revolving fund, but the 10% is going into the city fund. Because if you had that excess, didn't we define the revolving fund so it could go for the expense of the police and the system for the off-duty?
This is all brand new, so the expense of that in next year's budget will go into, we didn't know where we could put it, and Tanya said that we couldn't take.
Right, I get that part, but how much money is in the revolving fund now?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
Because it seems like if we have a big excess, to Councilor McGivern's point about why he doesn't like them, is lots of times they're building up a lot of money that just sits there. So I think it would be important for us to understand how much money is sitting in the revolving fund.
Yeah, I think once we get to that point when it's in the black, I think it would be a good idea to sit down and kind of cap that to whatever you guys would suggest in the black, just so that there are funds available should a vendor not pay for those fees. But once it reaches past that cap, I would suggest to take that revenue and put it into the general fund as revenue for the city. But always maintain a certain amount in that revolving fund so we don't fall into the problems that we had in the past with vendors not paying.
Well, we shouldn't, because they shouldn't get our details if they're not paying. Thank you.
The revolving fund is in the black mostly because contractors are paying what they owe and the 10% on top of it. So the money's in the revolving fund. Why can't the revolving fund pay for this?
Right.
That's what we asked. That's what we wanted to do.
Because the answer
we couldn't.
that
She
our auditor
said-
gave you doesn't make sense, because that would mean all the money couldn't go into the revolving fund.
Because, Joe, it's revenue, and we can't use revenue this fiscal year.
It's not revenue, it's a private, it's separate from revenue, because we
that was
can't
our-
use that for anything but the private road jobs.
Right, that was our argument.
Councilman,
It's for the
I
same
wish Tanya
purpose.
was here, because she's the one that really is creating all of this.
I told her we had nothing controversial tonight, Chief, so I'll take the hit again.
I wish she was here, because she's the one that keeps telling us that things we've been doing for a long time, we can't do, so I'm surprised she's not here, and sad.
When you get a new sheriff in town, things change. Counselor Murphy.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think I understand all this. So basically, if I'm hearing this correctly, we instituted a 10% charge on companies looking for road details. That 10% is originally thinking we'd send it to the revolving fund. That part, because it's not covering a specific police officer's pay for the detail, if I'm hearing correctly, she's saying, and you're paying for something else, the revolving fund is to pay for details, and that is not paying for a detail. I mean, I'm thinking that's what's happening. But I'm also, if this 10% is going to generate more than the 50,000, and if it's going to take a police officer from a desk to the street, I'm all for that. And the chief knows I'm very hot about that. So the other thing to me in the revolving fund is the revolving fund should be there. The money coming in should go to the officers that did the detail, and that should have very little left over when it's said and done. You know, maybe a little bit because they're getting paid the week after we get paid. But, I mean, I think we're spending, and I'm not saying that getting it out of stabilization and then trying to get it back there is gonna happen. It'd be nice if it did. But right now, we know this is what's there. We got a chance to potentially set up a system that maybe accounts for things better. It is already they're being charged to pay for it. So I would encourage us to go ahead and approve it.
Any further discussion?
Joe?
Counselor Tomlin.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Chief. And I'm just trying to get a better understanding for us and for the public. So if someone's doing a road job and let's say it's, ABC company, it's $400, so they pay $440?
Yes, yes.
The
that's
10%.
correct. Yeah, yes.
And so that's what you're talking about, this extra money.
That extra money pays for the system. Yep,
And that extra system, or that system we're getting is gonna take that officer and, as you said, may have to use 1 hour of his time instead of 7 or 8 hours of his time.
that's
And he
correct.
could be doing something else.
Yes.
And is this just this year? Councilor Vagan said it's an ongoing thing. More than likely, it's gonna be 50,000, but if you're gonna make 125, so you're 75,000 in a plus every year.
Every year.
And that money doesn't go into revolving, it goes into the general fund.
That's correct.
Okay. 'Cause I have some thoughts, because I know we had a running tab, and this is one of the items too from that 750 that wasn't really accounted for in all those budgets that we had, the supplemental budgets. So, my thought was sort of like Councilor Vacan's, and I know it's not easy. Rarely does any money go back into the stabilization once we take it out of there. I know sometimes we could ask the mayor to have 100,000 or 150 put into the stabilization, which I would feel comfortable with. But in this situation, going to the general fund, it's unlikely that that'll happen. But if it's something I believe that's going to help, maybe free up an officer and make this transition a little bit easier for paying off-duty and reserve and auxiliary police, I think it's definitely something that we should do.
Chief, one last question. The officer assigned to details, is that just private sector details, or does that include overtime for various reasons within the department?
A little bit of everything. He multitasks. He does other assignments also, so,
So some of the work is
Yeah.
actual city work.
absolutely.
Anything else? Counselor Sullivan.
Chief, so this system, have we already bought it?
Yes. I'll just say on that note that we bought it, and we didn't realize until later that we could not, we knew it would pay for itself plus, but we didn't know at the time that it was revenue we can't use during this fiscal year. We knew we'd have the revenue to pay for it, but then Tanya said we couldn't use it and access it this fiscal year, and it threw us into a loop. So we dove off before we realized that. And I'll take responsibility for that.
Well, I don't think there's any issue, Chief, as far as you thought the revenue was there. That's your responsibility, and you met that until the auditor told you it's there, but you can't use it. Okay, any other discussion? Chair will entertain anything.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of 50,000 from the stabilization account to the special revenue fund.
Motion fails for lack of a second.
Motion to deny.
Second.
Motion made and second to deny. Any further discussion? On the motion to deny, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No?
Motion carries 3-1. What I will do is, this will be referred back to the city council with the recommendation. We'll make a full report to the city council, and I'll ask the auditor to recheck what a special revenue fund is, and if that's a correct item within the budget, just for purposes of any city councilors that may want to vote in favor of this. We'll have it in front of the city council for next week. Thank you, everybody.
Motion to take 6 off the table.
We have
Second.
a few more. Item number 6 off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Transfer of $30,000 from stabilization to repair and maintenance motor vehicles police. Under discussion, Chief?
Yeah, it was, repair maintenance motor vehicle. I asked for 60 at the beginning of the year. It was cut to $30,000, cut in half. I have 56 cruisers. 6 cruisers are new, 50 are, 77% of the 50 cruisers have over 100,000 miles. The repair and maintenance part of it too is we didn't have a mechanic until the end. We didn't hire a mechanic until the end of November. So up until that point, we had to send out more than usual to Marcotte, to Jean's Auto, and to other places to keep the fleet of cruisers that are aging incredibly fast, just to keep them running. So I asked for 60, I got 30. I'm asking that I have to get all these other cars, keep them running until the end of the fiscal year.
What's the total fleet?
I have 56 cruisers right now.
And the 6 brand-new ones as part of that
That's correct.
deal with Marcotte?
Yes.
Would Marcotte be willing to make a, not a warranty, but a repair and maintenance agreement within the deal?
I think we asked them about a package, and it was not going to work. But
Because of what they wanted, or?
yeah, I think it was a little high for what we could afford.
Because for future reference, it might be a good idea to just keep tabs of it to see that maybe it would be worth it, knowing most cruisers are 24/7.
Yep.
Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, just the mechanic, chief. So we hired a mechanic in November, you said?
Yes, at the end of November, we did hire a mechanic. We're very happy with him. Eric does a good job so far. He's been outstanding.
Eric, my neighbor?
Yes, Eric, your neighbor. Forgot about that. He's doing an
Is
outstanding
that right?
job.
Oh, that's the guy I recommended.
Yep,
What's,
we like
you
him
hired
a
him in
lot.
November? I find out in March. Oh, okay, well, you would have thought he was, congrats, thank you, Counselor. We walk the dog by his house every single day, Sergeant. I said, okay, so he's working out then?
Yeah, he's working out really well. The problem what we're having still is that the backlog since we didn't have a mechanic for 2.5 years or whatever it was, the backlog of cases that we still need to send some out. He can't catch up. So he's working out. It's doing well. It's going in the right direction, but I have to keep the cruisers running until the end of the fiscal year. And I have like $1,200 or $1,500 left in that repair and maintenance account.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion made second to approve the transfer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back to item number 4? The DPW chief is here, that we tabled earlier. I think that's the only item we have for him.
Motion made second to take item 4 off the table for the superintendent of DPW. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Mike, welcome. We started at 6. I don't think you got the memo.
No, I didn't.
And I put you so far up the agenda.
You did. I appreciate that.
This item is, and I'm kidding with Michael because we talked about the agenda to get them in this evening, is a request from Repair and Maintenance Sewers, the 1,500, 500 advertising to retirement benefits out of the wastewater treatment plant. Could you run us through what the request is about?
Sure. There's 2 clerks that work at DPW who are paid out of the sewer fund. And there's also still employees that are working at the treatment plant who were public employees, city employees before the contract operations. So we have to contribute to their part of the pension, and we have to contribute to the clerks at DPW, their part of the pension. And I neglected to include the 2 clerks in this year's budget. So we had the money for the employees at the plant, but not our clerks. So this would have been in the budget originally if I hadn't neglected to include it.
Any further discussion? Motion on the floor would be?
Motion to approve the transfer.
Motion to approve the transfer. We'll recommend to the full city council next Tuesday that the transfer be adopted.
There's also number 2.
We actually already approved it.
Okay.
Is there any questions? We won't take it off the table unless there's a question for item number 2. Mr. Bloomberg gave us answer whatever questions that were asked.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Back to Police Department.
Motion to take item number 7 off the table for discussion.
So moved. All in favor? Any opposed? This is a transfer of $8,000 from stabilization supplies motor vehicle police. Under discussion, Chief?
Yeah, this is, supplies, as I stated earlier. I requested 60,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year. I was given 47,000. Same argument with the cruisers and the fleets, and this is for, supplies, tires, brakes, windshield wipers. Inspection stickers alone are $2,155 a year. We use that to supply the cruisers with, medical supplies, coolant, cleaning supplies, motor oil, batteries. I mean, on and on and on. For the aging fleet, I'm gonna need another 8,000 to, hopefully make the end of the fiscal year.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, Chief, you said medical supplies also?
Yeah, all of that stuff that goes in the cruisers, specific to the cruiser medical bags.
Yeah. So, as far as the medical supplies, has this been a major factor in it? Is there a higher?
Well, if you need medical help, it might be. Yeah, I mean, we have to keep
I'm
bag.
referring to Narcan and stuff like that.
Yeah, Narcan's not even in this right now. I'm trying to acquire that at no cost to us right now. I'm kind of working on that. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get Narcan at no cost to our department.
Okay.
Counselor Tomlin?
Yeah, just question, Chief. What is the amount in there right now in that line item?
I think it's like $1,200, $1,231. Yeah, it's $1,231 as of 2/20, as of February 20th.
Okay, and it was cut, you said it was cut to the council at, by 13,000 or?
Yes.
And this amount will get you through the next, what,
Yeah.
about 4 months?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
Make a motion to approve the transfer of stabilization to supplies motor vehicle police.
Second.
Motion made second to adopt, refer to the city council that this transfer be approved. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Passes 4-0.
Motion to take item number 8 off the table for discussion.
So moved. All those in favor? Any opposed? A transfer of $101,696 from stabilization to sick buyback police. Same amount of money. Under discussion,
I think we're on number, did I make that one?
Vacation buyback.
Number 8 was a vacation buyback, I believe.
my
number 8.
apologies.
Yeah.
From stabilization, $17,046 to vacation buyback police. And do you want to take them both up together?
Yeah, suspend the rules to take them both.
Motion made second to suspend the rules to take up 9 at the same time for purposes of discussion. We can take a separate vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 9 is the $101,696 from stabilization to sick buyback police. Under discussion, Chief, do you want to give us a
Sure.
breakdown?
Yeah, I'll just discuss this in general, the vacation, sick, and time owed buyback all together at once. I heard your questions to the fire chief, and I just say that, I sent emails out prior to the, while budgeting for this fiscal year. I sent several emails out, and asking who plans on retiring. A couple surprises came off afterwards, so I wasn't able to budget for it. I did get everything I requested in vacation and time owed buyback, but my sick buyback request was cut by $42,000, which would still have left me short anyway. So it's not a matter of not trying to put it in this year's fiscal budget, because I did. I did have conversations with everybody about dividing up and splitting between this budget year, next budget year. A couple of them were actually split between last budget year and this budget year. So this is what I need. And when I asked some officers about possibly going into the next fiscal year and waiting, basically was told no. They would like their money. I was also advised, and I didn't really look into it, but I was advised that if it's not paid within 90 days, that it's a 14% interest would kick in. I'm not 100% if that's sure, but that's what I was told.
And the part with the fire chief and allowing us to bring someone over, that's a personal decision, and individuals have a right to make personal decisions. What their finances are at the moment is, what, allows them, or what should be, why they're allowed to make that own individual decision. It's nice when a person's in position to help the city in these times, but understood. It's not no one's fault.
Right, I don't blame them. I just wanted to save you from asking, because I did ask.
You're getting to know us, huh?
Oh, yeah.
How many retirements have you had this year, and how many individuals is this going to take care of?
I've had 7, 6 officers and a dispatcher. So 7 total have received part of the payouts, and so 7 employees.
And this transfer is for all 7, more or less.
Yeah, most of them have been paid. This is just to finish it up, yes.
All contractual.
Yes, contractual.
Counselor Tomlin.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. And I know we've had this issue before a couple times where basically an officer doesn't have to tell you ahead of time. Or, I mean, technically they should be, out of courtesy, tell you probably, 90 days or 60 days ahead or a month
That's
ahead?
correct. It's 90 days, and there were a couple incidents where officers had, life changes and just kind of decided to pull the plug, and I understand that.
And that's what happens. I mean, so you may budget for 4 people, and that's what you did, and now you got 7 leaving, or 6, or whatever.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. No, and I also talked to some people, is this like, every couple of years you get a bunch of employees that sort of got on together, and so you might have, this year you're going to have 6 or 7. You may not have another 6 until 5 years down the road, or you might not have another, 6 till 10 years down, because there's like a cycle.
Yeah, and it's somewhat unpredictable. You can try to look into it. I look at who's going to age out. I spend some time looking at who's going to age out, who's going to be eligible.
Right.
And then sometimes people who don't even get anywhere near the 80% just decide to go. And so it's without a crystal ball, you do your best to try to predict it, try to have conversations, have emails, say, hey, you're getting close. Do you think you're going to go in the next fiscal year? So I do everything I can to get it in the budget. And sometimes it gets surprised. That's just the nature of the beast.
Right. And is there, on these buybacks, there's certain caps too now that maybe weren't there before, so sick time buyback and vacation time owed. There's caps on those now, right?
In each union has their own cap contracts. I don't really have them off the top of my head, but yes, the amount of sick days and things like that they can buy back are capped.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Counselor Sullivan.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. So how many additional officers, surprises did we have on top of what was budgeted for?
I think it was 2.
2?
2, yeah.
So basically the 118,000 represents the additional for 2?
Two lieutenants. I believe there were 2 lieutenants that left that I wasn't aware of prior to the beginning of this fiscal year.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
A motion to approve the transfers from stabilization to vacation buyback and sick leave buyback for police.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Both passed 4-0.
Motion to take up item number 10 for discussion. One more buyback, I think, for police.
Yep.
Time out.
It's the same thing.
I thought I was grouping them all together.
No, we just did two of them. I
guess
saw
it's
there's
all
one
the
more.
same.
There's one more.
We missed it, or my fault. I thought it was a little different. Item number 10 is from stabilization, $19,580 to time owed by, it is a buyback police, $19,580. Motion is to take off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chief?
Yeah,
I think it's-
yeah, it's the same thing.
Okay. Any further questions? Any further discussion?
Motion to approve the transfer, stabilization to time owed buyback police.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve this buyback for time owed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Chief, if you can hang around for this one, we may or may not need you, but we just want to hear it from you. Item number 11.
Motion to take item number 11 off the table for discussion.
Motion made and second. All those in favor? Any opposed? This is a request of $118,000 from stabilization to pay the school resource officer of $118,000. I've been made aware that this has been taken care of through the school department budget, as we felt it was going to be during the course of last year when the budget was put in front of us. Is that true?
Yeah, the school department's been paying us for those SROs for a few years now. And this is another, Tanya comes in and says we can't do that. So will be fixed in a separate SRO line item going into next year's budget.
For next year?
Correct.
Okay. The auditor, I did talk to the auditor this afternoon, and this is no longer necessary according to the auditor. Are we on the same page?
Are we? Because I don't find myself on the same page with the auditor a lot.
When you say no longer necessary, do you mean funding or?
No, that the
process?
officers, the school
Okay.
resource officers are paid by the school department,
Correct.
and that's been taken care of.
Correct.
So we don't need to transfer money from stabilization. The school department is part of the city budget, just under a slightly different umbrella. Very slightly different umbrella these past, 3 to 4 years, but it is city budget. And
Right.
they can pay for what they use in terms of services provided. And I understand it comes from your men and women that you are responsible for, but it's more of an accounting principle than it is
Right,
anything else.
that was another case of revenue coming in to the police department.
I agree, John, but in this case, the revenue is the city budget. It's just a different part of the budget, which I think is different from outside vendors paying for contractual work. It's not new revenue, it's revenue that was in their budget at the beginning of the year, assigned to this purpose. I'm not trying to tell you, but I was told today that this was taken care of both by the mayor's office, and I haven't talked to Dr. Zweig, but
Yes.
by the auditor.
Yes, the state auditor is aware of it, and yes, it's all taken care of.
Mr. Chairman?
Counselor Barley.
Well, we had, as the chairman recalls, we had Mr. Soto here, and he said on the microphone,
He did.
this is all set.
Yep.
So we voted to deny it, 5-0, went back to full city council. But I'm not
Correct.
sure why, at the last full city council meeting, it had to, we didn't sign the jacket. I was only told by you, that, why did it come back here, Joe? I guess is my question.
There was a question at the last city council meeting of what was not known. Mr. Soto, on behalf of the schools, did tell us at the finance committee meeting that this was unnecessary, that the schools was taking care of it. The mayor's office and auditor reached out to me and said that this is not about the budget. There are questions that they wanted to resolve. Since then, they've resolved them.
Okay, so that wasn't made clear. Okay, motion to deny.
Second.
Anything else, Chief?
Well, I just want to be clear that I did watch that meeting, and I was supposed to be at that meeting. I had a calendar mishap, if you can recall. I should have been here. But at any rate, when you asked Tanya about it, the auditor, she seemed to have forgotten she should have known all your answers right there, because she was the one who brought up the revenue situation. But apparently, I'm being told it's going to be cleared up in this Friday, so hopefully it will be.
Calendar mishap?
I had a calendar mishap.
Any further discussion? Motion on the floor is to deny. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chief, you are set, but let me say it again, because I said it once. I misspoke when I said management. It wasn't any reflection on your tenure as chief and manager, or on yours, Sergeant Hart, as a supervisor. I misheard what my friend John said, and I was reacting to something, and you used the wrong words. Thank you. One item left. We're 20 minutes off schedule. Doctor's right, that's not bad if I understand these schedules these days. Item number 12.
Motion,
Motion made second, take off the table for discussion. This is a communication from Dr. Zweig regarding a recommendation to submit a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority for one new middle school. On the motion to take off the table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Dr. Zweig, would you like to come in? And whoever else you feel would be part of the discussion.
Bring Aaron Linville and Anthony Soto from my team. Whitney, there we go, Whitney Anderson.
Whitney is always welcome. Anyone you feel necessary is welcome. Please come in and make yourselves at home. As you're getting ready, this is a communication that the City Council received on February 18th, 2020 this year. The City Council referred it to this committee for purposes of discussion. It's a request, as stated, to submit a statement of interest to the MSBA. This is here for discussion. We've had it now for 3 weeks within our possession, and Dr. Zweig and team is here to present it to us and to put their request as to what they're hoping that the City Council will approve for the purposes of going forward. Dr. Zweig, would you like to take the lead?
Yeah, I guess I'll start, and then other people can chime in if I've forgotten anything. Thank you for the opportunity. As you know, there was a failed vote for 2 new middle school buildings, at the time, following the vote, the MSBA asked us to withdraw the project from the pipeline, from the queue for construction, because the proposal was for 2 new middle schools. The voters voted against the proposal, and thus there was no funding available to build 2 new middle schools. At the time, the MSBA asked us, we had conversations with them. They saw that there's still a significant need for school facilities in Holyoke, and while there was disappointment that the vote had failed, there was still a commitment to try to support Holyoke to move forward with building new facilities. They encouraged us after much conversation. Well, there was some initial conversation in December and January with City Hall around the financing, or city finances, and then they encouraged us. We were looking for direction of what to do next, given that we knew, and they know, that an override or a debt exclusion was never going to go forward in Holyoke. That wasn't an option for funding the buildings. But they encouraged us to apply in this cycle for new construction. The cycle closes on April 8th. Is the deadline, and they encouraged us to get back in the pipeline so we didn't lose time around, continue to move forward to what I think a lot of folks in Holyoke believe, that we need new facilities. I think, what I've heard a lot is people didn't like the funding plan. They didn't support that, but they understand that there's significant need for new buildings. So the MSBA encouraged us to apply to get back into the pipeline, because nothing can happen unless we're back in. Getting back into the pipeline or submitting a statement of interest does not commit the city to any. There's no fiscal response. There's no fiscal commitment, and there is the commitment that if we were to be accepted again, which we wouldn't find out until the fall, that we would have to reconstitute the building committee, which there has been a lot of discussion about who's on the building committee, and ensuring that we have a wide range of people who represent businesses, who represent small businesses, big businesses, parents on the committee, and a wide range of stakeholders, which I think is a great idea. You'd have to start that again, and the process would just begin from the start. We actually have to start the process from ground zero. We hope that there be some effort to help us accelerate, but we were told we had to restart again. And so all this does is put our application forward. The MSBA will either choose to accept us or deny us. If they accept us, then we begin the process that we began 4 years ago when we first put forward the plan for new middle schools in Holyoke. At this point, we're asking for one school because the conversations we've had with City Hall and we've met with members of the City Council, we've met with members of the school committee, is that there is the potential for the city to be able to finance one building. We didn't want to make a commitment to a particular location, but the MSBA said in order to apply, you have to pick a location. And the only reason we picked the Peck location was because, well, not the only reason, but one of the most significant reasons was that the demolition costs for the Peck site would be reimbursable through the MSBA process. But from my standpoint, to me, it doesn't. We need a new middle school facility in Holyoke. Really, we need two. But given that this is a proposal for one, the location could be altered through the building committee process later on. But the MSBA was pretty clear, you have to pick a site. So that's why we picked the Peck site. And this memo details some of the reasons behind why we chose the Peck site. So again, what we're asking for is what has to happen with any proposal to the MSBA. We need to get support from the school committee first, and then the city council has to vote to support that. And as you've done in the past, or as the city council has done in the past, when you support a statement of interest, you're not, again, want to remind you, it's not about supporting, it's not committing any, there's no fiscal commitment at all. It's just a commitment to moving us forward to get back into the construction pipeline for new schools. There's a lot that would have to happen, and the building committee for I just want to again reiterate, the building committee for the two middle school project has disbanded. As soon as they withdrew us, it disbanded, and now a new building committee would have to be formed as part of a new application to the MSBA. I don't know if Anthony, Whitney, Aaron want to add anything to my comments. Whitney, you look like you want to say something?
Oh, no, Dr. Zreich's assessment and chronology is correct. So we are just trying to get started in this process to actually preserve and to bring into the next generation, if you will, the assets that the city currently enjoys.
Dr. Streich, you said we need a new middle school, but the last proposal wasn't just about a middle school. It was we need to do something with 2 or 3 of our elementary schools. Mm-hmm. What would this proposal do in terms of alleviating some of the poorer conditions of the elementary schools we have?
Yeah, we'd be able to get out, with one new middle school, we'd be able to get out of, a few of the elementary schools, not all of them, but it's a start in the right it's a start in the direction of trying to replace older facilities with newer facilities that accommodate the learning needs of students today. We need to get out of our older fleet of buildings. We should be running fewer buildings than we are now based on the number of students. So it puts us on that path. It won't do everything that we had wanted. But again, the financing wasn't there. I totally respect that. I understand that. If we wait another year, then it's another year before we get back into the pipeline. And, we just keep delaying the opportunity to get at least one school. And I think even one school is a step in the right direction for what we need right now for our kids.
And the one school would it lead to any savings within the school budget, closing of an elementary?
Yeah, there would be savings, not as much as we had projected, obviously, with 2, but yes, there would be savings, yeah.
You mentioned the MSBA talked about financing in the I think it goes without saying, the voters resoundingly
Right.
sent the message about an override.
Yep.
An override vote that they don't think is correct in terms of building new schools. And that's a big part of why we're sitting here. We understand that. But there's one element that never came out, because it's the city and mayor and the city council that would agree to bond, for any building assistance with the reimbursement. And one other message that was sent even before the override vote was, we're not voting to bond with a construction cap formula. That's unfair. Has the MSBA or the state legislature and governor taken any steps to correct the construction cap?
As far as I know, that hasn't adjusted. We do hope that, we do think that there will be an adjustment soon. It won't represent the 80% that I know a lot of people are hoping for. There's some in the recent governor's budget, there's some additional funding for capital expenses that we should see some benefit to, but it's not what folks like you, Joe, and others would like to see. We all like to see closer to 80%.
With all due respect, 4 years ago, when my eyes were opened up to what the original proposal was about,
Yeah.
my eyes were seeing 90%. And even the 80% was fine. But when we sat here about 2 or 3 months before the final vote, or what could have been the final vote, and to learn from the developer, there's a construction cap formula that this year brought us down to 57, 58%. I'm still picking my jaw off the table about that. And I've still never gotten a straight answer from anybody down in Boston to a gateway community with the lowest income per capita, how they think that is justified or even correct.
Yeah.
And I'll get off my soap opera now, because the chair is taking advantage of being the chair. Is there any discussion? Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah. So just to be clear, Steve, the MSBA has not changed the formula from what it was the last time around. That's still the same square foot price.
That's correct.
Is,
As far as I know, Mike, I haven't heard otherwise, no.
and hereby, I just want to
Yep.
confirm that. So by submitting a statement of interest now, that does not, if there's a change in the future, are we locked in with the current one?
No.
Or are we eligible for the new one?
You're eligible for the new one, not until the building committee submits all the necessary paperwork, as we did the last time around. It wouldn't be locked in for a while. I can't predict what the formula is going to be at that point.
So if a new committee was formed in September,
Yep.
would we expect to have those numbers by the time the new committee is formed?
No, because the committee would have to have substantial discussions about what the plan is going to be. So it could take a number of months to a year before, because you have to examine the plans. There have to be input from the people on the committee. So it'd be hard it would probably be at least a year and a half to 2 years away.
All right.
I that's my best guess. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. And as far as any special programs, I know when we met with Jack McCarthy there, they were working on some things for gateway cities. Is there anything forthcoming or anything on the horizon to tell us it would be a different result, or to expect something?
Not that I'm aware of. Obviously, there's the funding formula for Chapter 70 has changed substantially in favor of gateway communities. I'd like to believe the trend will follow suit for capital projects as well, but I don't have any. I can't say with any certainty that will be done in the next few years. I'd like to believe that that's the case.
Okay. And, I know I asked you this earlier
Sure.
today when we spoke, but just to get on the record, if, this is very speculative, but if the square foot reimbursement rate was to change, if there was some special programs, would we then be locked into one facility for 550, or would we be able to go to a larger facility that would accommodate the entire student population?
Again, this would be subject to the board at the MSBA but they've been very open to whatever the building committee discusses. They were when we discussed in the last iteration, we ended up on a 2-building proposal, which they believe they were amenable to. I think they really care what the community's feedback would be, and if the building committee felt that a 1-building solution was the right solution, I believe that they would entertain that. I've said from an educational standpoint, I don't think that's a good idea to have one building of 1,000 students, but there are people that believe that, and I think that's those are conversations that people have to have and should have, just like we did last time. But if you have different voices at the table, right? That may be a conversation that emerges, and maybe there would be support for that. So I think they would be amenable. I think they certainly want to work with Holyoke. That's the message that I continue to receive over and over, that they see the need, and so they want to work with the community on what folks think is the best option.
Yeah, and that's the same impression I got from them at that
Right, you were in the
meeting.
meeting with them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, by submitting a statement of interest now, it's not going to tie our hands and put us back a year from now, back in the same position of doing another statement of interest because we go from 550 to 1,100 student population.
I don't believe so. I don't believe so, given the amount of conversation and work that we've had all along. Again, the statement of interest is just the first step in what is a longer process. By waiting another year, it's just waiting to get back into the construction.
I think
Q1
I
more, yeah.
understood that pretty
So,
clear
yep.
down there in Boston also. So,
And I just will say, I spoke to the MSBA. I did not want to put a specific school name on the proposal. I wanted it to just say middle school facilities, and they were very clear, you have to choose a site. So that's the only reason why we chose a site.
So to put it in terminology that the general public will understand, what we're doing here, we're at the deli counter, we're taking a number to get back in line. No financial commitment here whatsoever.
I would say that's a good lay person's way of explaining it, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Riley?
Yeah, thanks. I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Joe, for running a good meeting again. Just want to point out, and then I don't know if no member of the public approached me, Joe, to ask if to speak at the mic, but the chair may want to entertain a motion to suspend to allow the public to speak to us for, a minute or two or three, depending on what the chair wants. And then I appreciate Dr. Reich being here. I want to congratulate him on his new position. And then I just want to point out for the public, because the public can really only just watch this table. We don't have like generally not panoramic view. But once again, the chairman of the school committee for what it is again absent, and that's the mayor, not present. So I want that pointed out, and I want that on the record. And to my view, I see one elected school committee member here. I see two former elected school committee members here. So I want that for the record. No mayor, one elected school committee person, and two former elected school committee persons here. So that's the interest that we have from the school committee, to the best of my knowledge at this point. Thank you.
I would like to recognize one of our elected school committee officials. Mildred Lefebvre is here, and we thank you for being present. And the chair will be happy to entertain a motion, once we got through our first round of a discussion, but Councilor Bacon did have her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be sure that I understood clearly relative to the SOI, that it wouldn't preclude the city from taking other actions in other arenas should opportunities or ideas come about. Would that be accurate?
Can you just clarify that, Councilor Bacon?
Well, in the last process, we had done the SOI and it wasn't a commitment in that, but as it evolved, the SOI took on the quality of a commitment, if you will, even though initially there was not a financial commitment. And when it evolved into the two schools, that did become a commitment. And so what I want to be sure of, because there's always the opportunity for parallel processes, something to happen in one part of the city while something's being considered for another part of the city. And you may be aware that there is an initiative to form a study committee on a part of the city council that has been held up for 2 months now. I hope you would be supportive of that as a study and thinking tank and a broad-based committee that only sees itself as a study committee, not a committee of authority, because I think that's how we bring more people to the table and end up with projects that will work for the city. So I hope we could count on your support in that regard. But I just want to make sure, if we're in the queue to build the new building, that we're not out of the queue for other initiatives that might come up, such as renovations or improvements or
No, you
other
could-
things of that sort.
Right,
that we would-
and Whitney and Anthony had brought had just recently brought to the city council some renovations. No, it wouldn't preclude us from doing that. I mean, to your point, though, I think the building, look, I support anything that gets more input on this process. I understand the feedback. I've heard the feedback about making sure that there's balanced perspectives on, whether that's the building committee, which I think is an opportunity, and I've talked to the mayor about that, when putting forth there is no building committee now, but putting forth a new one, that it does represent different views, so that there can be some really robust discussions about the plans and so forth. I think that's a very fair, I think that's very fair input and needs to happen. I don't want to, I think that's the city council's decision about forming another advisory. I know you've brought that up, Councilor Vacan. I just support having more input into the process. Anything that will get us to a place where we have new facilities for kids, I support, but I fully understand the need to ensure that we represent the cross-section of the city.
And just through the chair, the whole idea of the committee is to get people together thinking about it sooner rather than later, and not waiting to see if in April we're in the queue and then in September we have a new group. Why not have a group of people who've been very interested and continued to express interest over these last number of months? So, thank you.
Yeah, and I would leave that up to the committee, to the city council, I should say, to decide.
Certainly. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Joe?
Counselor Tomlin?
Yeah, just briefly, thanks you, Doctor, for coming down and explaining this a little bit more clearer to us. But I along with Counselor Vacan, about a committee, a broad group of people that can look at this. If we need a school, like you said, we have to have a place where it's going to be at Peck, which makes a lot of sense, because taking the building down, which we have to do, is being reimbursed. But I think you stated earlier, and when you spoke, that a broad section of the community, teachers, students, business owners, homeowners, business, educators, people in the school committee, people in the council, would make it a fair, a well-respected group of people to try to get this this statement of interest and try to get the state to look at everybody's viewpoints on how we can make this work for our students and the best of for our community. So I really appreciate you stating that, and I think the sooner we do that, the better. I know we have to get this in by April, but to try to form a group before we get going, I think is really important to get all viewpoints, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether it's too costly, whether the state doesn't want to give us enough, bringing on the state rep and the state senators in this early on, so we could look at in the future to try to get a project that really is good, not just for the residents of the city, but mostly for the students of our community. So thank you.
Counselor Murphy?
Yeah, a few things, and I think there's some questions. First of all, we do have time. We got to get this done by April 8th. But I do think some of the things to me that are important, whatever we decide to endorse, and I know it's not a final endorsement, we're not putting money up front, but we are saying this is our initial proposal to the MSBA. Whatever we are going to do, we need to be upfront knowing that we can do it. And so there's some concerns I do have, and I had this concern, and Dr. Reich and I have had conversations about getting the financial information from the city to verify that if we do the project at Chestnut Street, this is what it would cost, assuming we got similar rates, and I know Councilor McGiverin is going to try to get more, I know Councilor Sullivan is going to try to get a higher percentage, but if we got similar rates, what would the impact on the city budget be for the next 20 or 30 years, whatever we decide? And if we went to Peck, what is that option? The other, and I mean, I think though we had a start of that because of the two-school proposal last year. We were having a lot of financial information provided. I think we need to get updates on that financial information. We need to know what bonds are going to be paid off in the next couple of years, what ones we know are coming back online. what kind of new income projections we have. I mean, we've had a city council that had an order to find out about community host agreements with the cannabis industry since October. We have not received any report as to any community host agreements that we have, what the projected opening for those companies is, what the potential revenue to the city is. We also had a proposal in to dedicate, and Council Sullivan, I know you amended it, I think it was 40-something% to a capital improvement fund. But if we don't know what those projections are, is that capital improvement fund going to be 100,000 or is it going to be 5 million? Those are the kind of things that we need to get answered. And I don't think it's fair to put something out and then have to change it again. I think whatever we do, and I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but we need to be able to say, we know we can finance this. We know this is going to have this benefit. If we do PEC, and this is my concern about PEC, where do those students go? And I know when we had the Charter and Rules Committee meeting, part of the issue was we don't have a plan for where they go, and it is potential that some of those may have to go into another community. I mean, those are questions that need to be answered before we tell, we're going to move you out of here. We need to know where we're putting them. So those are questions that I have. I know the two questions that, what will the site be? And I mean, obviously Chestnut Street is in my ward. But beyond that, it's part of the master plan. I know they say that if we approve PEC, there'll be development at the Chestnut Street site in the near future. I'm going to argue that I've been asking for development in South Hoyoke for the last 35 years. It is now coming into fruition. If it's going to be another 15 or 20 years for Chestnut Street, that is a downtown corridor that could be stabilized by a school. I also agree to some extent, and we've talked about, could we build a school with 600? And I know I've talked about adding an extra student or two in the classroom, which would get it closer to 600. So those are also concerns. I also have talked with Councilor Bacon and other councilors about trying to make sure we get a building advisory committee, whether it's an official MSBA sanctioned one, but that we get that going so that we are united as a community. We want to get progress, but we want to get it working together, not working in opposite directions, and understanding we're not always going to agree, but respecting the opinions of each other. So, I mean, those are all things, and again, I will certainly support the idea of submitting a proposal, but I would be much more confident submitting a proposal if I see some financial information that says this is what we can afford and this is why we can afford it and this is how long we can afford it. And then that has yet to come. And again, I think the second aspect to that is what do we do with the students at PEC? And your 500 and something students that are going to have to go somewhere. If we build it at Chestnut Street for that 2.5-year period, they may not be in the best building, but they're stable. And then we have the new school, obviously that's where they'll go. So I mean, I do think the goal is admirable, but I want to make sure that we can afford it. I want to make sure that we don't say we can afford it without backing it up and then find out we get the proposal, we get approved, and we find out, you know what, we don't have enough bonding capacity. We don't have this or we don't have that. So let's get the information. I know there's a time crunch. Let's make sure we live up to that. Let's make sure we don't miss the deadline, but let's get as much information as we can so that when we do recommend something, we know we can do it and we know the community understands it.
Mr. Chairman?
Dr. Zweig, Dr. Zweig, could you share the cost of the demolition of PEC with us? Are they what they were, or are they increasing?
Do you want to, I'm gonna toss it over to Whitney, who would have a better ballpark.
The cost of the demolition are approximately $2.5 million for PEC School. There is an escalation there every year, approximately 3%.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, just because I want to hear from the public, but I hope what Counselor Murphy said, that should be the theme for this entire process. So somebody ought to stop the tape at 7:40 PM and watch that, who's ever responsible for procuring that information. That shouldn't be considered dead air. Everything Counselor Murphy, and I never call names because I know, Mr. Chairman, we're not supposed to, in our rules, we're not supposed to do that, but when I'm giving a compliment, I feel like we can. Everything the counselor said from 7:40 till 7:50, that 10-minute period, somebody in city government getting a paycheck, whether it's HPS or city council or city side, should have marching orders on that, come back to us, instead of having October surprises like we had, the $1 million or whatever it is, whatever, all that stuff that was going on, where to put the schools. That should be watched over and over, and there should be an action plan developed as a result thereof. And Councilor Murphy, probably won't happen because we know human nature, but hopefully there'll be somebody, and the elephant in the room, what we haven't even talked about, obviously we're getting a new receiver. So it hasn't been said tonight, but it's got to be said. As of July 1st, no communications to my knowledge. So that's an important point. The receiver is going to do whatever he or she wants to do. Is it Secretary Riley, Steve? Who's the secretary?
Commissioner Riley.
Commissioner Riley. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard from Commissioner Riley as a chair. Has any counselor? I haven't heard from the commissioner. So, I mean, he's made an absentia in Boston. Good for them. But this is a fluid situation based upon, the facts that we have on the ground. But I repeat what Councilor Murphy said, is that should be all laid out before we send down anything to Boston. Thank you.
Councilor Bradley asked a question, Dr. Zweig. I believe we're getting a visit soon.
Yeah, Commissioner Riley will be here Friday. He will be meeting with representatives from the City Council. I've had that correspondence with Chairman Todd McGee.
Councilor Murphy.
Yeah, and just along that same lines, so Dr. Zweig, I'm assuming, and you correct me if I'm wrong, as you have done a few times, and I've corrected you when you were wrong, that you've spoken with the commissioner about the potential of this plan, and I'm assuming that he is, whoever becomes the new receiver would be getting some kind of instruction from him that this is what we're looking to do.
Yeah, I would just also reiterate, I'd like Councilor Bartley to hear this, so I'll wait till. I just want to reiterate that this plan about middle schools came from the citizens of Holyoke. That the families, students, teachers, from the moment I arrived here, said they wanted middle schools. So this plan is a plan that came from constituents, folks here. Obviously, the way the plan was going to be paid for was not something that was supported. Totally understand. But the direction of going to middle schools and away from the K-8 model, that was not a plan. That was not my plan. That was a plan from the day I arrived. And my expectation and my understanding is that whoever is the next leader, there's strong momentum. The school committee has been strongly behind this. City councilors have been behind the idea, and most importantly, parents and people who work in the schools want to see middle schools. I don't see that direction changing. It's been very clear that that's where people want to go. You just got to have to figure out a way to pay for it.
Councilor Sullivan?
Just so I understand correctly here, Dr. Zweig, Commissioner Riley is here on Friday to discuss, to look for our input as far as what we're looking for in a new receiver, right? I understand he has some influence, but he's with DESC?
You're right, not with the MSBA, right?
Not with the MSBA.
That's right.
Okay, I just want that to be clear in
I
everybody's
mean, if you're going to
mind
be
also.
going to be in the meeting, feel free to share your. I know you'll be share your
I'll-
input about the
I'll-
MSBA process as well.
Yes, yeah. All right.
Councilor Hernandez?
Thank you, Chairman. My question is specifically towards the public needs committee that needs to be formed. So the previous one was completely dissolved,
Yes.
and there's a new one that's going to be formed. And how is it that I heard that it was a wide variety of people that make up this committee? How is it that it gets formed? Who identifies the people that are on this committee?
It's a mayorally appointed committee. Okay. Yeah, and the criticism that we've received is that it wasn't, it did not represent a wide range of perspectives from the community. And so, again, it would have to be re-selected. That's part of the requirement of the process, that you have to have a building committee.
Mr. Chair?
Thank you.
Councilor Barley.
Okay, so Councilor Sullivan just advised me, Mr. Chair, that he was advised this morning that Mr. Riley is coming to Holyoke. I was advised at 7:54 tonight that Commissioner Riley was coming to Holyoke. If the chair wants to answer when the chair was advised, the chair could let everybody know, but I found out at 7:54 p.m., 4th of March, that Commissioner Riley was coming to Holyoke to talk about the receivership. So, there you go. Thank you.
Ask a question, we get you an answer.
I didn't even have to ask it, Mr. Chairman. It was just offered at 7:54.
At this point, the chair would love to entertain a motion
So
to
moved.
allow the public to speak. This is not a public hearing, but especially at this level, we always welcome to have public input when we have so many people, I think, are here, perhaps just to listen to part of this discussion, but I know there are more than a few that would love to join this discussion, and we welcome that. Traditionally, the chair is asked to limit time speaking, so I think with the members of the audience, I know everyone here, that you all have something to offer. We're only going to limit former school committee member, Mr. Moriarty, and former city council president, Councilor Jordan, to about 15 minutes apiece. Everybody else can speak all you want. But with that in mind, is everybody, any discussion on allowing the public to speak? All those in
second.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? If you could come to the mic, if you so choose, give us your name and address. For the record, we are being televised live. We are taking, recording the entire discussion, and certainly you're welcome if anybody wants to come forward and speak about the process or ask questions.
I don't really want to come to the mic. I'm going to stay right here.
You have to come to the mic because
You know that I don't like to talk.
I know. Could you make sure it's on, please?
It's on.
You got it.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, everyone. And it's getting warm in here. I just
Name?
want to thank Laureen Reardon, 40 Arnodale Avenue. Thank you for the process that I think everybody tried to go through. I appreciate the idea of a think tank, although I wonder if that isn't just more of a delay in the process. I do have a couple specific questions. One would be to Receiver Dry. In your process after the end, we got our final vote, it was my understanding that there was an actual process for the city to go back. So as an observer, I was watching that, waiting. I didn't really see from our representatives. I didn't see, doesn't mean it didn't happen, so I'm not saying that. I didn't get to see as much as I would have liked to have seen. So what I did see come back, and maybe you can tell me, because I'm kind of looking for these documents. I'm looking for your letter to the MSBA after our vote. So was there a letter from the receiver to the MSBA? Did anybody advocate on behalf of the city to say, which I saw in a letter that you got back, where I think it was, it must have been from the MSBA, where they say it's not adequate funding. We're only going with somebody who's adequate and capable. And legislative in the law says adequate and capable. The policy and the think tank you're talking about is saying across the country, cities like Holyoke, we can't levy any more property tax. We all know that. So who is going to now advocate that we get our foundational, this city, the foundational sales tax that the city of Holyoke has been putting in to the liquidity of the whole entire funding of this since 2004. We haven't had our fair shake. I just want to know who put up their dukes after the vote. Because after the vote, there was a process, and somebody needed to tell Boston that it's time The game's up. We want our sales tax. We want what is deserving of our students here. And although maybe we say our community is not representative, because all of our community doesn't have transportation. You know the students in Peck, they are disabled, they are subgroups, they're English language learners, and they do need strong representation. So I came out tonight because I think that somebody here, when somebody in front of me says, oh, all the money here in City Hall, everybody's advocating, everybody should have done the job. And I just don't know that it was done. I saw some of the feedback back. I would like to know where the documents are. Was there a meeting, an actual meeting? Because I saw that there was going to be a meeting and then nobody showed up. I'm not saying you didn't show up, but I know that there were expectations that people were going to be there. And I just thought there was going to be more of a pushback from the people that were into the spirited conversation that we already had. Because I can't argue about windows or those needs, but I can argue from the standpoint of the people who couldn't afford and couldn't see. I think what you were throwing out now is a little bit more reasonable and a little bit, if you're looking at $500,000 a year, why can't we go back to our $1 million back input that we were talking about from the school budget? That would make what you're talking about now almost within a 14-year time a zero school for the city of Holyoke. It would be level funded by the funds from the school department and an 80% reimbursement. But for counselors, anybody, school committee who doesn't get to vote and their voice isn't heard any longer, we are no longer under AGA, which is what requires you to call our schools underperforming. I substituted at Morgan School, not an underperforming school, a high-performance school. Those numbers, level 5, level 4, they were mandated so that we could improve schools through funding, through a mechanism. And I think that those words have hurt our teachers, it's hurt our communities. People don't even realize that you were mandated to just lay off everybody and to restructure and to pick a restructuring way. They just think you're a mean person. So I just want to know where I can find those documents. I am writing a paper right now. So I do kind of need to know where I can find those documents. And then also, why are we going to let what was behind us just lay? We need to fight. You're going on to another place. This is your learning ground, and you've already learned in other parts of the country. Why not raise some hell?
I think, just to, Maureen, thank you for
Yeah,
the question.
I know.
No, hang on, don't move. And thank you, good timing, you're well. And I have to, I have to go on record and say, speaking as the former teacher, dance recital teacher of my children.
Like that, don't give me the
So all the punishment I was put through, we're getting back here. No, I didn't say that.
And I wear my green coat tonight.
Questions are good. Fair question. Okay. Dr. Zeig, would you like to stab at some of that? And I think Counselor Sullivan knows about something in terms of an answer. Does that make sense?
First, Counselor Sullivan.
Sure. In answer to your question about who went and fought for the city of Holyoke and represented the MSBA, I was a city council representative on the building committee. I was there for 90% of the building committee meetings. After the failed vote, I went to Boston. I was there with Devin Sheehan, Steve Zreich, Aaron Vega was there, our mayor was there, I believe Whitney was there, Anthony was there. Did I miss anybody? All right? And everybody spoke passionately for the needs for the city. We stole pages out of Councilor McGiverin's speech about servicing the whole 9 yards, right from the gateway city aspect, the per capita income problems in Holyoke, the commercial tax rate in Holyoke, everything, the large, the underserved disadvantage that the community of Holyoke is in across the board was represented in the strongest possible terms. There's no question. I was proud of every single person there. The answer back to us from McCarthy, Jack McCarthy, and one's the chairman and one's the president, I forget which, was emphatically they understood the problem, they empathized with us, but they were not willing to make one single exception. We would be the first exception they ever made, and they were not willing to do that.
Okay, and in that, so that contingent that went down, was there, and you referenced that Joe McGiverin had something in writing, was there something in writing presented as well?
No, Joe presents this. You want to give the speech for us, Joe, one more time?
No, I just want to know, was there something presented in writing, and then what was returned came back in writing.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Hi, my name's Erin Linville.
Thank you, Erin.
There's a lot of information on our website. The tab is, you go to turnaround and then middle
It's in the
school
turnaround.
redesign. But a couple of the documents that are on there, for example, there was a November 20th joint statement from the mayor's office and Superintendent Reich regarding that MSBA meeting. And then there was also that public meeting you were referring to was on November 13th. At 5:30 at Holyoke High, the Dean campus, which we publicized through, through the website, social media, and there's other information on there.
And then after those things, was there a legal mechanism that anybody came back and said, okay, well, we can be the first that the state decides? Arguably, we have helped with this fund that other communities have relished in beautiful new schools that aren't putting into this fund, that don't have a Holyoke Mall. I would wonder, I can't even imagine. I asked somebody who owned a pretty decent sized small business today what their receipts were annually in sales tax on a 1%, what that would be. I can't imagine since 2004. And so I know it's a legislative thing, so I just want to honor the people in the room and the people that I know that this is time we need to press people and to press our legislatures, because this has to get done. It has to be turned around. And Holyoke has always been able to be a model for other communities. This is the time to do it. And I would hate that we have to go through the whole new process again, because I still think there was 120 day from the vote. So am I wrong on that? To rebuff?
Yeah, so can I just, and I can, if you give me your email address,
Thanks,
I'll
no,
send you, I can also send you what we sent them. We did not, one of the things I made very clear is we did not pull ourselves out of the process. We made them pull us out.
Right, and I was wondering when you said that they asked you to withdraw?
They wanted us, well, just want to be clear, like, we were asked to withdraw. We did not formally withdraw. The board took a vote to withdraw us from the process, because I think to Councilor Sullivan, we all felt like we wanted more to be done for Holyoke. But the board the board of the school building authority voted to pull us out, and that's why we have to reapply. I'm happy if you give me your email address, I'll send you all the.
I can find them, as long as I had some direction. There's so much, I've seen the turnaround plan.
If you can't find it, just email me and we'll make sure.
And I don't want to hold up anybody any more time, but on the turnaround plan, I know you said you came with direction, but that turnaround plan was your turnaround plan, right?
Yep.
It was signed by you and the commissioner. The failings of it, the accountability that's in the accountability gap of the education. You can find this on the web. It's saying that we weren't accountable to these students. We didn't do what was right. So it is time for people to write another letter. I'm writing something that's going to get a grade. I'd like to have something substantial come of that. I don't want to waste my time. That's why I picked this issue. It's important to me. Like I said, I've subbed, but I am going to just speak to one more thing because there are people in the room that care. The building that you're talking about taking down is a building that, from what I understand, has pathways, and is it another charter that has disabled children, English language learners. These children are a protected class. This is not just your regular student base. This is a protected class of students that we need to fight for. And it is time for the commissioner and the MSBA to do what's right. That's it.
Lauren, just one more answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
I heard my name kicked around, I'm
I
not
know.
too sure, but, and I appreciate that. The other thing about Peck, too, is it's a great place to have a dance recital, but no, I'm really getting off the tangent here. Hey, we brought Jack McCarthy in to represent the MSBA here when we learned a lot about this with representatives of the school
And I
department
watched-
and the building. And if you didn't see that, or if you don't have that, we can get you a copy of the tape and certainly condense the minutes to what he told us. One of the things I learned that night is the history of the MSBA, which is about 10 years old now. And the reason it was formed and charged with reducing the cost of school buildings assistance from the state. Politically motivated, I'm sure. The legislature, the governor, and the auditor, the state auditor, are in charge of that. And they need to make change. The MSBA is doing their job. I disagree with what they're doing, but they're doing their job. And they didn't want to make exceptions to the city of
I
Hoyoke,
think it's
even
the
though
s-
it's clear.
And I think it's the
exceptions
state
need to be
treasurer
made.
that's in charge of the MSBA, right? The final chairperson is the state treasurer.
But it was the auditor who formed the MSBA, if I'm correct, Joe Danucci, or reformed.
I don't know the answer,
MSBA.
but the treasurer is the head
Is
of
in
it.
charge.
All I'm saying, there's a lot of Hoyoke money there and a lot of Hoyoke kids waiting for their new school.
But
And they're
thank you.
deserving.
And your points are well taken.
Okay, thank you. Sorry I took up so much.
All right, time's up.
I know Kevin's gonna.
Anyone else wish to come forward?
And I am in favor if the process is a statement of interest that it should be done.
Steve, welcome. If you could state your name and address.
Steve Kravitz, 9 Deer Run, Holyoke. Taxpayer here in town involved in the initiative to decline the vote that happened this past time. And one of the reasons that I'm up here is that I think you have to have leverage in this process. And the only leverage that you have is to table this vote tonight and get the answers that you need. I agree with everything you said in terms of getting the answers. We need to know what this committee is going to look like. Excuse me for saying this, but the 4-year wait is your fault. You didn't have a committee that was of the community. You had a committee that was of the mayor and of the school department. If you had invited the community to come into that early on, I think the process would have been more open, more fair, and you would have had a different result. But instead, 2/3 of the citizens of Holyoke voted against your plan. So I think you have to have leverage in this process. And one piece of leverage would be to identify from the mayor who's going to be on this committee ahead of time to pass Councilor Vacon's proposal, and to get it in writing from the mayor that this next go-around will be a fairer process in terms of inviting the community to partake of it. That's one piece of leverage. The second piece, and maybe even as important, if not more, is that you don't know, I don't think any of us know exactly what the city's going to need in the next 20 years. We have pipes that are breaking, we have infrastructure that's rotting, we have lots of social service needs that need to be taken care of in this city. Nobody, as far as I know, has come up with a plan to pay for all of this. We have a retirement piece that's going to hit pretty hard pretty soon. So again, agreeing with you, I believe that we need the numbers before you do anything on this. You're going to commit, and again, you're saying you're committing only to getting back in the pipeline, but once you're in the pipeline, you got to move pretty quick in terms of coming up with a plan and numbers that go along with that plan. And without knowing what the rest of the city needs, I can't imagine why anybody would vote to put us into a pipeline that is required to come up with a plan in a fairly quick method. Additionally, and this is the last thing I'll say, the plan that was presented last time had inflated figures in terms of the cost of construction, did not consider renovation, and did not consider all the other possibilities available to the city. I think all of those things need to be considered before you do anything on this. I would encourage you to table this vote tonight, use the leverage you have, and let's get some answers before you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward? Former Councilor Kevin Jordan, welcome.
Kevin Jordan, 18 Raymond Avenue. I'd like to start with the first point, which is relative to this committee. In the first actions, I do want to give the mayor credit for this. He gave me a very nice congratulatory message that our side was overwhelmingly successful. As you all know, there was a lot of hootenanny out here about posters and this and that, and it made it sound like the average Joe in Holyoke was somehow this very tiny little minority say of what ultimately happened. I almost want to make a button like Grow Holyoke, but it says in big purple and white 65%. And I might start walking around wearing that. But anyways, that is the silent majority of the community. And with the silent majority after the thing, and the mayor was very gracious in saying, congratulations. And it wasn't about us, the committee that opposed it. That was just by necessity on behalf of our fellow citizens. was to say, look, where do we go from here? Because generally, one of the things I do very much agree with Steve, Dr. Zreich, is, the need for improvements in the schools. And I myself, just like everybody in this room, has always been a strong supporter of making improvements to schools. But the question is, how do we do it and how do we have it? And the suggestion I made back in November was, let's get the committee going. I mean, that could be done tomorrow, right? This notion that, you got to pass the bill in order to form the committee is a bunch of baloney. So let's dispel you of that immediately. The committee could be appointed tomorrow, okay? Have the committee, even if it's not the official post-passage committee, it could be adopted tomorrow. Then the mayor just takes that group and makes them the formal group after this goes forward. All of this last month's that was offered has all been wasted, okay? We had one public meeting on November 13th, and that was a circular firing squad because all you had there was citizens like me saying, what in the world were you people thinking when you did this? Now you finally believe us, okay? Now you thought we were all full of baloney and that you were going to steamroll right over us. That obviously didn't happen. That'll never happen again. That's a lesson and a tail kicking that I hope sticks around City Hall for a good long time because that needed to happen. Against all unbelievable odds, the citizens of Holyoke rose up to say, we're going to be still in charge of our own community. So let's hope that never happens again. So now let's have a committee made up of diverse voices and start going through these proposals. And Steve's 100% right. How do we go forward and just pass this and say, oh, we're in a pipeline. We have no idea if this is the final proposal. We have no idea if we can afford this. And at some point, we're going to have a committee, and then we're going to actually do the real studying. And then once we do the real studying, we're going to go and change our proposal because this is just a placeholder, and none of this is for real. Don't worry about it. We'll catch up with you down the road. That's how we operate at this stage of the game. I mean, good Lord, we're all adults here. We have seasoned professionals here, many people with six-figure salaries. We need to be, doing this the right way, okay? And the right way is let's begin to have these deliberations and have real conversations. Councilor Murphy's 100% correct in everything he said, which is let's get into the financials. For example, if we did have one school and it was theoretically $70 million and it was theoretically only 57%, you're looking at a payment to the city of at least $1 million if the schools contribute $500,000. So, do we have an extra $1 million for the next something a year? Do we have that? If not, why are we passing this? That's the point. Details matter, facts matter. And so I think that right off the top is something we need to go. And I do appreciate Dr. Zreich, as always, very gracious, reaches out, wants to work and supports a diverse building committee. There's many people that were on the committee the last time that should remain, but others, I think if you have 6 or 7 people who represent landlords, who represent small business, large business, senior citizens, renters, all of these type of teachers, constituency. If I heard one thing, you had a major disconnect even among teachers in the city saying, what on earth with all of our problems? Why are they so singularly focused on this? The leadership is so detached from reality, okay? You got to get them to even buy in. I heard major opposition. Some of the most ardent opposition to this was from teachers. Take that to note. So I think if we can have a conversation about affordability and show that this is for real, that we actually could do this financially, then we get to the whole next question, which is, okay, let's kick around some of the proposals. And I'm open to potentially, if we have a real building committee form and they're meeting and we're getting into these questions about the financials and we can do this, then if we have to put something innocuous or generic in to just we're in the pipeline for future considerations, we might be open to something like that to keep, quote unquote, the process moving. But you got to do this part first. I think that's just imperative. And then at that point you can, and there should be a clause in the statement of interest that says Holyoke reserves the right to change its proposal. that we're going to have a building, and this is not the final proposal, because it very well may not be. We may want to do other things too, which was one of the discussions that happened the last time, which is build a building and also renovate another building. That might be one of the options. I don't know. There's so many options. But all of this needs to be vetted. We're not really at a point yet where we can commit behind anything. I think those are the areas that I would just focus on. There's so much, and I don't want to repeat parts that other people said, but I think that is the part that I think is the thing that is the current disservice in this, which is this notion that council, you need to pass this statement of interest before we can have a building committee. That is totally disingenuous. Do not fall into that trap, okay? That is not true. You, the mayor, could form, or the council could have a committee tomorrow that we appoint, and then these people just fold in to become the committee, and there should be meeting and deliberation and discussions. Otherwise, I think what you're left with is basically a process where, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you on all the details. That may come 6 months from now, a year from now, and then where are we? Where we finally get the information, and then it comes back and it says, oh God, I guess we can't afford this. So, okay, so we wasted all that time. Meanwhile, I do agree, and I won't repeat all the points, but this notion of a sustained campaign, whether it's with the governor or the legislator and these folks about the 80%, one of the other things that I think would be something that would be fantastic, that would be of huge help to us, that we should seriously consider, is reducing Holyoke's minimum contribution to the schools, and that the state cover that. We're contributing approximately $10 million to the schools from the local contribution. The state, if they could cover $5 million of that for, say, a period of 4 or 5 years, that could cover this. That could cover a lot of our other major things that we need in the community. They did it for Springfield. Why can't they do it for that? Let's remember back. Springfield goes into receivership. $52 million in the hole. Okay? They appoint a control board. They allow them to borrow the $52 million. Springfield only ultimately pays back half of that, and the rest is forgiven. They were gifted $26 million. Holyoke's not as good as Springfield when it comes to this type of stuff. We're a community that is in a dire financial condition. We are at, whatever you want to call it, financially, we're against it, all right? The only reason we are keeping it together with glue and tape for this year's budget is because the residential property values went way up, okay? And they went up the year before. Had that not happened, you wouldn't have had the $750,000 extra to increase the levy. And on top of the $900,000 on top of this year's budget that got increased on top of the budget the city council voted last June. So you just miraculously came into $1.6 million. That's only because of the property values. Had that not happened, we're going to base it on that. You could have another 2008 and then the whole thing is collapsed, or you're not going to keep that rate of growth going. I mean, unless everybody's home's going to be worth $1 million. So these are just some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I appreciate the April 8th thing, but we really got to get the mayor to get on board and form this committee. I gave a list of names of people that would be interested. Members of the committee that I work with have also done so. I mean, it should be a balance. You don't want 14 Kevin Jordanes by any means on the committee, but you should have one, and you should have, a Mike Moriarty and, all the different pendulum of perspectives on it, and then take it from there. So good luck with your decision. There's a lot of people here in the community that want to support the city council and the school leadership to get to a solution. I have 3 kids in the public schools. I am passionate about the Hoyok public schools, love the schools, want good schools for my kids and every other kid. So, everybody can be on the same team. We just got to get around one proposal, and that's only going to come through discussion and communication. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else wishes to come forward?
Mr.
Welcome, John. Just name and address, please.
Good evening. Yeah, Dave Yost, 20 Sydney Avenue. I'll be very brief as always. I want to take exception to the comment that it was a failed vote. I mean, we're not a failed vote unless you consider democracy a failure. I think that the failure was in the process. We went from, maybe having some open to a take it or leave it situation, very divisive, and that's what we don't want to have again. I know everybody here is in favor of education, including, the capital improvement side of it, but we've got to, consider all aspects of it, the financial impact, looking for equitable funding for the city, what kind of impact it's going to have on housing security for the very families we're trying to serve. So we've got, so I don't really feel comfortable going with, what was half of probably the most expensive proposal we had before, but going forward, with the study committee and looking at the financial aspects of it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Dennis, welcome. Name and address, please.
Thank you very much. Dennis Burks, 18 West Glen Street. Thank you. I was part of the school building committee also, and a lot of work has been done on that committee. So there's a lot of work, even when the new committee is set up, that really doesn't have to be done. You can look at a lot of the work that was done. The buildings that were designed beautifully to accommodate 550 students each, and within consideration of special needs students, safety of the students, the lighting and all of this stuff was designed beautifully. So if you start another committee, you can look at a lot of the work that's already been done, so you won't have to really do a lot of the work that's there. So it's not going to take that as much time as it did for us to get to the point that we're at, which is why I would like to see you push this forward and do the statement of interest and put it in the MSBA so that we can continue moving forward. If it's one building, and I agree with you, Councilor Murphy, we do have to look at the funding. Those 65% of the people that voted no, I bet 65% of those people, because I talked to a lot of them, would be in favor of this. What they weren't in favor of was their taxes going up. People were afraid of, what am I going to do with my house if my taxes go up? If the city can do this without the override, then let's do it. But you have to be serious about how much it's going to cost. One school with 550 students in it would cost about, $29 million on the city side. So it's about $50 million to do that school. If you do a school that holds 1,100 students, you almost double that. That'll be about $90 million. That's part of the reason why we wanted to do the two schools. It's close to the same amount. So you have to look at that financially, what we're going to do and how we're going to move forward. Some of the comments and complaining that was made earlier was very discouraging. It sounds complacent. Complacency has no place in the role of leadership. You can't just say, oh, we're a poor community, we can't afford. No, what are we going to do next? How are we going to bring revenue in? What are we going to do? The residents voted. I'm glad they voted. I wanted them to vote. And we see where we are. 30 years later, from a similar vote, it's the same thing. So how are we going to lead us into a place without a tax override where we're going to be better? That's the leadership that we need now. And I heard that before also. We need to do better for ourselves and not rely on the state to do anything for us that hasn't done anything for us yet. So moving forward, as we think about this, yes, the big thing is how we're going to pay for it. We know how the people feel, but who's going to lead us there? Who's going to get us to that place? Who's going to bring revenue in and talk about how we can do for ourselves? We know how the residents feel, but we have to lead. Somebody has to fight for our kids. Somebody has to make education the priority. And it isn't, and it hasn't been for a long time. I can go back to even 2014 when we weren't in receivership yet, and we had the chance to use lynch again. Yes, I'm going to bring it up because it was brought up at that time, 2014. Let's take Metcalf, put Metcalf into where Lynch is. Let's take the school department, put the school department where Metcalf is, and save the city $300,000 a year. Now, At that time in 2014, the president of the city council at that time, most of the city council said, no, we're going to use Lynch. There's potential there to bring in business and all this stuff. And where are we now? There is nothing there. Look at the Kmart Plaza. Kmart's leaving. There's nothing there. Who's going to take charge and bring a revenue into this city and then make education the priority and start rebuilding? Buildings are falling everywhere. And who's suffering? Because of this no nonsense, the children are suffering. Just because Peck is the building that we're choosing to raise and then construct again doesn't mean that other buildings are not in bad situations. Those are the worst schools. It doesn't mean the other schools are good. And we're going to be here again talking about what school we're going to do next. Part of that 65%, we're like, what about the high school? Well, what about them? We can't even get a middle school built. And then when we come back another 10 years, looking to build another school, what are we going to do? And not even to build. We need money just for renovations and to keep stuff up. So I'm looking for real leadership, not complacency that we're a poor community and all of that stuff. We need leadership now. Yes, we need to go to legislation, but we also need to do for ourselves and make education a priority.
Thank you, Dennis. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward?
Sylvia Rebello, 104 High Street. I'm a retired teacher and a longtime resident of Holyoke. I've done many things here. Education is my priority, always has been. I wasn't against the two schools. What I was against is how are we going to pay for it. We need schools, but there's plenty of schools in this area that are older. In Springfield, I was a teacher in Springfield. There are some that are over 100 years old, but Holyoke never decided to keep up with them. They never maintained them. So what are we going to do? Okay, we could have gotten 2 new schools, and then they weren't maintained. And then we would be back to square one. A lot of people wanted new schools because they thought that that was going to help with bringing up our grades. The schools don't bring up grades. What's taught in those schools is what brings up grades. And why the vote was voted down is because, honestly, the city can't even afford to provide with basic necessities like clean water, like fire hydrants that work so our buildings don't burn down, like brownouts. That's what's important before we even get to that. Why don't we maintain this? If grades were contingent on school buildings, what happened with Dean? That's a fairly new school. What's happening? It's not barely even being used. It's not the schools. We have schools. We can make them work. It's what's taught in those schools. And we need to make sure that we have clean water. The building I live in right now, and I never thought that I was I've always advocated for injustice. And I never thought that I would be in the position I am today. And recently, a few months ago, while I'm brushing my teeth, I heard all this crumbling coming down. And I thought that there was an earthquake. And my son runs out of the room, Ma, what's going on? I don't know. So when the rumbling stopped, I looked outside. The building next door had crumbled from the inside, all in. I called the city. There was no one to be found. I said, you either get me somebody to come down right now or I'm calling everybody. So they got somebody there. He came and checked it, did nothing else. 3 months later, the bricks are falling down. My bedroom is adjacent to that. There are 100 buildings in this city that are empty. That's a priority. Our children that live in those places, near those places, okay, they go to a new school, and then they come home, and what are they surrounded by? Empty buildings, okay? A brown, it looks like I can't even say a bombed out shelter. How do they feel? They don't even, if they go to a new school, they're not even going to want to come home. That's what you're dealing with. Let's deal, okay, we do need a school. And as long as we can pay for it, fine. But if we can't pay for it, who's going to pay for it? There are people here that can't even make ends meet, that can come home and they don't even know if their lights are going to be turned out. We have elderlies that are barely making it because they're on a fixed income. Sure, we need schools. I'm a teacher. Why not? But let's first make sure that we can pay for it and that our basic necessities are met before anything else is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Anyone else who wishes to come forward? Michael, give us the name and address, please.
Certainly. Michael Moriarty, 1 Lexington Avenue, Holyoke. So I want to try to bring things back to the main topic at hand, which is the question of bringing forward city council approval and getting a letter of intent to the MSBA by April 8th. It does not have to be contingent on anything. It's not going to change the way state funding mechanisms work in Massachusetts. The Commonwealth has been paying for 85 to 90% of our schools every single year since 1993. There has been a generational vote that took place last year. It's going to change our financial situation somewhat once again. That stuff is beyond this singular community's reach because we neither have the resources nor are we the only community in Massachusetts. We really are part of a broader Commonwealth. And so we have to understand the MSBA process, and we have to reflect on our city's own experience with the MSBA process. One of the first things I did when I was elected to the school committee in 2000 was send a letter to Superintendent McDonald asking that a committee be formed because Holyoke High School needed a lot of work at that time. I was brought into science labs that were in OSHA violations, that had unsafe situations that hadn't really been addressed even with furniture needs for over 20 years at that point. That was about 7 years after the most profound financial crisis the Holyoke schools had ever experienced. And why did they experience that? Because in part, a vote was made and the schools were denied funding. And within 2 years, you had your superintendent on national TV talking about how we're warehousing kids in Holyoke. We are still, at this age, trying to dig ourselves out of that at certain levels. And so when I hear folks proudly announcing what they've won last fall, you know, there have been a lot of elections, there have been a lot of decisions made in different ways in government that I'm very excited about and glad of, and there are others that I think were not a good idea and were harmful to begin with. I don't think a great victory was achieved. I think great harm was done to the city of Holyoke, and it was done to a student population that is among the most vulnerable, marginalized, and unable to address their concerns as any in the Commonwealth. They are children. They are children of very poor people. They need a community that's going to find out how much can we possibly do for you, not what's the least can we do for you. So right now, I go back to that 2000 letter because when did we get Holyoke High School completed? 11 years later. Okay, the MSB was created in the middle of that whole process. This is a glacial process. We were 4 years into a process that would have been 6 or 7 years if the vote had gone the other way. That's not fast. We're back to square one. So there doesn't have to be any conditions. I don't think we're a city that are at war with one another where we have to find leverage or things are never going to happen the right way. I'd like to think we can have a less divided community and maybe have more respect for the work that people are doing at 57 Suffolk Street and inside of this building and inside of all of the different places, whether it's in Malden, whether it's at the MSBA office, to really try to believe that folks are trying to do the right thing for these children who need a solid education and are not getting the resources they need to get it done. Don't do this. Let this deadline fail, and we are assured that we can't get in line until April of 2021. And maybe they'll still have a possibility to look at an expedited process. And maybe other concerns elsewhere in the Commonwealth will come in line in front of us that will make that impossible. If it's going to be another 11 years, this school is going to go 40 years since the last time we built a new school for the children in this city. Far and away, the longest period of time since this city was formed as a town in 1850. Is that the legacy that we, as the adults making the decisions in this community, want to have when we're looked back on? The generation that could never get a school built for its kids? You have to replace your facilities periodically. I think the biggest lost opportunity was that there really was a solid strategic plan that would have affected the whole district that was behind this. Get us through this letter of intent and let a committee be formed, and let it be a committee that is as inclusive as possible, that gives the broadest array of voices, that allows us to get a building done, but more importantly, that stops focusing exclusively on money and pays a lot more attention to what has to be done to change the outcomes for kids. Because we've made progress. Morgan School is a success story you should be proud of, with turnaround. We just broke a wall that we had never broken in our city's history as long as we've been measuring third grade reading, when Metcalf taught most of its little kids how to read. And that's a lousy bar to be rising to, because we should be expecting every school to teach most of its little kids how to read on time. We need a plan that achieves that. So put it all aside. Know that getting in line now is the surest way to get something done in a reasonable amount of time, and that every year's delay can be a massive increase in costs, a massive increase in additional years, not months. And just keep it simple. We can get this letter in, we can get committees formed, we'll find out all the financial stuff. Nobody wants it more than the MSBA. I think you know that as well. They've made that extremely clear. This letter's not going anyplace unless all of those questions are answered with clarity that's going to satisfy an agency that was ready to give us $78 million and is going to be ready to give us tens of millions of dollars again. They don't do it foolishly. They don't do it improvidently. They want to have all of the information and all the financial backup before they're going to allow that. So you don't need leverage for that. It's going to happen. And so this should be pretty straightforward. Please refer this back to the full committee so the committee can make its vote and this letter can get out on time. Otherwise, we compound the harm that's already been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Kathy, please come forward. Name and address.
Thank you. Kathy Anderson, 237 Lakes Drive. I didn't intend to speak tonight. I came to see when my husband was coming home for dinner.
What's for dinner?
Takeout at this point. But my husband is the maintenance administrator for the schools. But I come tonight, and I was the planning and development director for the city of Holyoke. I ran the Chamber of Commerce. I worked in the mayor's office for a long time. I worked in the Head Start program. I've had a great deal of experience studying this community. I did the largest urban renewal plan in the city and looking at what things the city needed to do in order to spur private development. I work at the hospital now where I'm studying the social determinants of health and what are the most vulnerable populations that we have in our community. And it's our children. It's their education. With that said, I have a couple questions that I wanted to ask just for clarification. If we postpone this vote, what's the cost of inflation for this project, and what will it cost us down the road? What would the difference be? What's the cost of inflation? I'm not sure who can answer that.
I think your husband might be the best person to answer that question.
That or Councilor Sullivan. Want to get off the spot, Whitney?
Thank you, dear. This was not planned. But it's approximately 3% would be a conservative, or would be a low estimate. 4% would perhaps be a little more conservative. But if you look at a project for a single school, for the entire cost of a project where we had previously seen $60 to $65 million, that would be $1.8 million. You divide that by the number of days in a year, and you're somewhere around $5,000 a day of escalation costs per day. But
So I think that needs to be put on the table. Thank you. And also, can someone talk about Lynch School and what are the challenges with redeveloping Lynch School?
Counselor Sullivan would, well,
No, Counselor Sullivan first, maybe?
Please.
Okay, let me address back to that first question though also. I think, Whitney, the numbers you use are based on a 3% escalation, which is common in the construction industry. There's no way we can predict inflation. That's a budgetary number. That's all it is. There's other situations out there where we could go into recession, contractors get desperate, and the price could go down. Not going to project that either, okay? So all of those are hypothetical budgetary questions, and the 3% is the best practice to come up with a real number, and it, generally speaking, it comes in under that. So that's always been on the table. That's always what was in front of the committee, and that's the way we looked at it, but was to go for that number, which would be achievable. As far as Lynch School, the MSBA has told us point blank, they will not give us a nickel, not a penny for that school, all right? No matter what our plans, all right?
So if we-
Also, I can tell you, all right, because I've been in the demolition business for 20 years, all right? And there's been a lot of misrepresentations about the viability of renovating that school, all right? It is loaded with asbestos. I am a state licensed asbestos inspector, all right? I have been for years. I can tell you, and I see this stuff out there on social media, I try not to respond to it. People that don't know what they're talking about talk about encapsulation, dip lagging. That's fine for a steam pipe, all right? When you go to renovate a room and you have mastic, black mastic, which is holding the tiles to the wall, under today's current building codes and Massachusetts and Mass DEP, all right, which is stricter than the EPA, all right? We set the standard for the country, all right, outside of California, all right? You even drill a hole in that wall and it's got to be done under containment, okay? The costs just spiral out of control trying to do a renovation on a facility like that. I've also heard the same things about why did another school, why did a charter school do it with an abandoned with an empty warehouse, not an empty warehouse. It's very, very easy to take a big, open, empty box and do something. That is not what we have with our schools, a big, empty, open box. All right? So I just want everybody to be clear about that. As for when they talk about renovation, they really have to do their homework, which the committee that we had formed did. And I want to say, in defense, I've heard a lot of things about inclusiveness. I think it's wonderful that we do form a new committee, include some more people, but the people that were on the committee, I was on that committee, all right? We had Brian Beauregard on the committee, we had Dennis on that committee, and they put in a lot of hard work, and I think things that have been said make it seem like the people involved in that committee did not do a very good job, and they did a fantastic job. They put in a lot of hours, and they did a fantastic effort on behalf of the city. And it was a debt exclusion override. 65% of a 17% voter turnout, all right, that voted against the funding mechanism, which I totally agree with, all right? But that's what, it wasn't new schools that were voted against. It wasn't the job of the committee. It was the funding mechanism and what it would be ultimately a cost to the city. That's what that vote was about.
Thank you for answering that. That's very thorough and accurate. And I also understand at Lynch School, the handicap accessibility of that building is crazy that you had to go through the stage in order to get to another part of the building, and it's just totally cut up like that.
There's many, many other problems, but I can tell you just the renovation costs of that are astronomical. Anybody that presents any numbers that compare it with any other type of renovation do not have a background in construction or the materials that are involved in that school now that were legal. That was back in those days when that school was built. All right, those were wonderful. Everybody thought those were wonderful materials. It was a miracle of modern science. and it's turned out to be atrocious. And one last thing, I don't want to drag this on all night. If you look at the highest, it's not in the construction industry, it's not in the asbestos installers, the highest growing rate of mesothelioma and asbestosis is in school teachers and school administrators. That's one of the only segments of the population where it's still growing.
Thank you. And
Mr. Sullivan likes to bring show and tell stuff to us, and he's not going to bring any of the asbestos he talks about because
not a good idea.
any of us who took the tour of lunch saw it. The other thing, Kathy, and if my memory serves me correct, in one of these 4 positions you told us you served with so well over the course of years in the city of Holyoke, the master plan identified the corridor off of 91 as one of our areas that we need to look at for economic development. It's not the only area, and certainly doesn't take away with what we're doing in urban renewal, downtown, and so forth. But it was identified as an area carefully, not to disturb residential neighborhoods, that could be and should be developed economically for the purposes of bringing new growth in. And I think that's something that we've lost over the last handful of years. You know, when we start planning it, and we finally found a developer that was willing not only to develop the site, but to demolish the school itself with all the asbestos in it. You know, it's part of economic development, as is education. So that's part of what we looked at 10 years ago, when after the school committee gave up, the school department gave up, and the school committee took a vote. When school, we went out and made proposals, and they not all now come forward, but we have one that's in front of us now. May not be the best we want, but the private sector invests money, not the public sector.
Thank you. One last question. Has any of the communities in the state of Massachusetts ever received the full 80% reimbursement rate?
Since the MSBA was redesigned, or actually not redesigned, but it's only been formed 10 years ago.
And
That's
what
a
are
good
the
count.
numbers of the communities around us that have gone for it?
Prior to this new MSBA, 80-90% was regular.
Can I?
I can clarify that a little more too.
Councilor Sullivan?
So what they do is they reimburse you for 80% of the allowable square footage. So it's 2 things. So you've got, and I'm just going to throw a number out there, $400 a square foot. And I think the number is somewhat less than that, but it makes the math easy for me. So they'll give you 80% of $400 a square foot. If the cost of your school building is $600 a square foot, they're still only going to give you 80%. You get 80%, you'll only get 80% of the $400. So you lose the other $200 delta in there. That, when against that square footage price, is what reduces mathematically your number down to 60% or 59%. They are giving you 80% of their allowable square footage price. The problem with the state, with the MSBA, is the square foot price that they allow, that they'll give you 80% of, is too low. Nobody recently, in the last 10 years, I forget the night, I had them all, I got frustrated with the way the things ended with all the hours spent on the school committee. I think I put it all out in recycling. But that's the basic problem, is nobody's able to build at the square foot price that they allow. Am I summing that up pretty good, Whitney? And that's where the real problem is with the square footage price, not the percent. They give you 80% of too low a square foot price number.
I hope everyone understands that, because that's a really important fact. I don't think anyone in this room doesn't want to build schools for our kids. It's how we go about doing it. We can't waste any more time now with cost of inflation, with the kids that we have. We need these schools. Most of the buildings are over 50 years old. They're considered antique. They're antiquated. The machinery at Peck School to run our boilers and things, if they go out, it's the taxpayers that are going to end up having to pay for that. So I just encourage you to vote positively tonight and move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else who wishes to speak for the first time? Sorry, Kevin.
I'm Mary Burks, and I live at 63 Taylor Street, and I will be briefer than I've ever been at this microphone. Sitting in front of me is this city's elected leadership, and it's a difficult task to do all of what you're asked to do, and particularly to pull the city together in support of our public schools. But tonight I respectfully ask that you vote in the affirmative to send this statement of interest to the MSBA. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else for the first time?
Will Puelo, 958 Main Street. Just real quick, I'm going to be really brief. I've learned to go last or close to last for these things because all the comments are done so I can sit down quick. But I mean, I think it's really important that we defend the 65 percenters, right? Because that was an overwhelming show of support against this thing. I mean, it was a 30-year tax increase. I mean, we're forgetting about that. So that was an overwhelming part of the city that said that this was a horrible idea. So if we're not taking a time to stop, kind of think, decompress a little bit, and then put something together that's made up of leaders in the community, and I don't mean leaders in here, even though you guys are doing a great job, but we should we should put people outside, you know, civilians, quote unquote. I'm a military guy, so I'll use that term. We really should be putting, you know, people on the outside that aren't involved in this process, and that's how we're going to get a better outcome. So I really wanted to defend the 65 percenters. That was really important. The second thing I wanted to say was the building committee that was established the first time for this. I mean, we shouldn't use that model at all. You know, somebody needs to say it. We need to hold government accountable. I think that was a huge part of the problem the first time, and that whole model should be thrown out. You know, people do a great job. Thank you, public servants. You guys do a phenomenal job, but I think that's important. We listen to people, and we start fresh. We throw everything out because that was a part of the problem. We don't want to end up with another 30-year tax increase and have everybody out here campaigning to stop this thing. And then the last thing I was going to say was that, I mean, I kind of have a feeling that I kind of know how this vote's going to go, but that's neither here nor there. But I mean, it's really important. Like I said, and Terry, I mean, God bless you. You're a great guy. You've done a phenomenal job for Holyoke, for Ward 2. Everything you said was absolutely correct. You know, we need to stop, think about this, and, you know, we can't even provide people with clean water. What are we doing, it really is, it's incredible. It really is. But I hope that we take the time to kind of, you know, step back a little bit, come up with a new committee so that this thing doesn't get beat down again, because that's what's going to happen. So, yeah, that's all I got.
I just wanted to thank everyone. You know, I come on hard sometimes. It's just that I'm very passionate. Thank you for all the hard work all you guys do. I know Terry for over 40 years. I campaigned for him in 1981. I have a picture of myself and Carlos on the corner of Cabot Street campaigning for Terry when he ran for mayor. I know a lot of you guys for a couple of years. I want to thank Dr. Zirk. He's really been instrumental in a lot of things in this community. We may not agree a lot of times on the same things, but I do want to say we do have to put this letter forward. I just think that the process next time when we pick the leaders or the people to be on the building committee, that it's not just people from the school committee, people from the school department, or people that Alex picked. I want it to be a broader selection so that everyone's included and on the table. Thank you.
I just wanted to do a wrap up on a couple quick points and then just make one observation. One is the beauty of these things, and having been around for a long time, you do get to make some interesting observations. One is that the same people that advocated that said if we went up 10 cents on business, that would be a disaster, stood at the rail year after year making that claim, then would turn around and be leading the charge in favor of a 250 plus business tax increase. The same situation where we had the people that were voting, Holyoke had a middle school model for decades in Holyoke, right? The same people that were advocating to end the middle school model and go to K-8 are now leading the charge in favor of the middle school. So you want to know why citizens get to the point where they totally are so disconnected sometimes from what the leadership is saying. And then the last example is related to Lynch School. I don't know if you were on the school city council yet, but Counselor, but you'll recall many of the rest of us stood here and had to have the strongest advocacy from the mayor on why we should put the charter school inside Lynch, and advocated strongly in favor of a long-term lease agreement with the charter school to go into Lynch. So if it was all this terribleness that Lynch couldn't be used as a school, the same person, again, these things, it's like people, it's like it's a total rerun movie. Just go back and replay the tape on a lot of these things. The same person who's saying that building should not be used for a school just a couple years before is saying it should be used for a school and we should rent it to the charter school. And oh, by the way, it was only because the city council stopped it because there was a provision in the agreement that said if any renovation needed to be paid over $1,000, the city of Holyoke would have to pay for the renovation. So I would just make those observations. So this is why the public is so cynical. So the last point I wanted to make, and I neglected to make it the first time through, is why the money portion of this is so important is where I'm getting feedback from residents and business owners is they feel that this is now a new slow march to an indirect tax override. Here's how the logic goes for that. Their view is that if we can't demonstrate that the city healthily could pay the $1 million or the $1.1 million, if you were to pass this, and we're telling the MSBA that we can afford this, by the way, that's what your vote means, because you wouldn't send a proposal that you haven't vetted yourself already, right? So you're telling them that you can afford this and that we can afford that. So if we have that level of capacity in the budget, but then in fact that turns out not to be true, then the point is the city will need an override in order to fund the basic operations of the city. Because if you run out of money, then what they're going to say is, well, now because we used all the money to pay for the school, we won't be voting on a school override. Then the proposal is going to be, we need an override to fund police, to fund fire, to fund trash pickup. And the view from some, cynically, believe that, well, this may not be popular. What the public is going to be faced with down the road when the bill has to actually start being paid, say that's 3 years from now, then they're going to be having these tug at the heartstring arguments saying, if you don't vote to give us $1 million override or $2 million override for operations of the city budget, you're going to lose your police services, you're going to lose your fire services, you're going to lose your trash pickup services. And then, where are we then as a community? So we just got to be really careful. These things are vetted in advance. And, if we can do it financially, then yes, believe me, the people who were opposed to a massive tax increase, and oh, by the way, residents, who the hell are we to tell them what they should or shouldn't have to pay or what their families can or cannot afford, and we shouldn't judge them if they voted no, that they said this is how much I can afford and this is what I can pay. But I think we need to be clear on this point that we can afford this in order to go forward. And if that is the case, then we need to make sure we're also making a commitment that we're not slow walking the city into another override because you're using our operating budget to pay for this, and then you have enough money to pay for all essential city services. If you're at the point that you're ready to say that that's true, then vote for it. If that's true. And the fact that you've researched that, and number two is that you have a committee in place to make all of this happen, which should have been formed 3 months ago. It's been a total squandered 3 months. Then by all means proceed. If that's not the case, then you should do that work and then proceed.
You want to debate the former counselor?
I don't want to debate him. He's much better than I am at debating. One thing I'd like to address, Kevin, is one thing he said. We're not telling anybody, by putting this forward, we're not telling anybody that we can afford something. And we're not telling them we can't afford it. All we're saying is we'd like to be in line so that when you, the MSBA, tell us what is your new square foot price, what other programs might be available to us, we are in that queue. So we can find out, and then the committee, whether it's in September or November or December, they have X amount of time to respond. And they can say, you know what? we've seen your new formula. We've seen your new programs. We're out. The committee can decide right then and there. There's the financials before we even take one step further. But without being in the queue, that all gets put off. This is no financial commitment. And I'm all for the committee. I'm all for a more diverse committee. And I hope some city council members step up and take my place so they can go through this wonderful process too.
Been there, done it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening, whether you chose to participate by coming to the mic or you chose to be here to be part of this discussion. We appreciate it, and it is part of the process and always should be, and as far as I'm concerned, will be part of the process. And we did so about an hour, 5 minutes, Kevin. That's not bad. We appreciate it. I think I heard a lot of questions come through the mic. I think I heard a lot of questions come through the city council, and our good Dr. Zreich is with us this evening. What are your thoughts about answering or getting answers for some of the questions and thoughts that have come forward?
Well, I can't answer the questions on the financial side of it. I mean, I think those are, those are questions with City Hall. I know the mayor has said, the mayor's office has said that they believe they have the funds to move forward, but that's not my purview to make. In terms of, the building committee can be formed at any point. I just want to be clear about that. I hope that didn't come across that it had to wait till September. It can be formed at any point. So I want to be absolutely clear about that. Ultimately, I get, you guys have to make a decision. The city council, not you guys, but the city council, men and women, have to make a decision about where you want to go. At this point, I want to address the one question about what the timing. We did not have the green light from the MSBA to even put forward a statement of interest until a few weeks ago. We've been back and forth in conversations. We thought they were initially going to tell us, we don't want you to put forward a statement of interest, but because they wanted to be certain that we had our some of the financials in order. They also wanted to be sure that they had their own discussions, and to which they came back to us and said, okay, now we want you to file a statement of interest. So there was no time wasted. As soon as we got the green light and we were told, if you apply, there's a high likelihood we'd accept you back into the pipeline. That's when we brought this forward. We did have a conversation with the school committee. The school committee was very much in support, for the most part, not everybody, but very much in support of the direction of moving forward. When we told them that we had to select the site, Peck was the site that they supported moving forward. Just trying to think what other questions have been raised that I can answer from the school district side. To Councilor Murphy, I understand the concerns about, yes, there would have to be relocation costs built into down the road for the Peck site. If that's what the decision was made. If the decision was made to build a Chestnut, there wouldn't be the relocation costs because we'd be able to get out of Lawrence School and use Lawrence School as a site to hold students. It'd be much easier to relocate students. The challenge with, I think we made a very, compelling case that Peck has the most significant needs as a facility right now. The fact remains, Peck is a terrible school building. It needs tremendous work. It is the one, we have a lot of old buildings in need, but the one that I am most concerned about for safety, health, and wellness is Peck School. And so, of course, and it's not a school, it is a school that we think needs to be taken down. And so that's why this recommendation is for Peck School. But I do understand Councilor Murphy's concern, that there would be a relocation cost that would have to be built into the project for moving the kids while Peck School was renovated. That's a fair point. I don't know if there's anything else, Counselor, that was brought up that I can answer.
Dr. Zreich, with the original process, excuse me, process taking the 3 to 4 years, there's the design selection part of the phase.
Yep.
That cost, the MSBA voted twice to amend what was put in front of them. The second or the final amendment was when it went from 1 school to 2 schools. And the MSBA can amend SOIs that are put in front of them as time goes on. And I think Mike Moriarty noted that not just on this last project, but it can and has been done in the past. But we ended up spending $1.3 million on that site selection design process development. That was told to this body before we voted twice that that was 80% reimbursed. Has that been reimbursed to the city?
Woody, do you know the answer to that? Has that been reimbursed as of yet?
The closeout procedure for that initial process is still in place. We have received payments for the monies that have been paid for the OPM and the architectural services to date, and we are now closing out the final bills in regards to that. So ongoing payments have been made to the city to reimburse monies that have been expended through the state's pro-pay process, which is an electronic transfer. I have overseen those invoices, and now we are in the last phase of that small amount of appropriation there. So,
Will we get 80% of what was spent?
yes, that's what the state has told us. Yep.
Okay.
And our share would be approximately $260,000 of that 1 point.
Okay. The reason why I wanted to know, if we certainly want to know before we take a vote here, that we're going to, whatever we do get reimbursed, at least
Sure.
at the design development level. In order to know what a project is going to cost, and I speak from experience here, we need to design it. We need to, to do the site selection. We need to go 3 steps forward. That costs money. In order to get there, we have to spend some money, and that's exactly what the city did in the project that most recently was in front of the MSBA. The final vote and the fact that it had to go to an override question doomed all the good work that was done by the building committee. And I say that because the final vote isn't the override. It's an important part of the process because we don't have the revenue to pay for it. No community has the revenue to pay for school buildings the way they cost in the way that they have to be designed. The final vote is the city council and the mayor on the bonding. And it appeared when this committee met last before the override took place that that was not going to happen even if the override passed. And the reason was the cap on the construction formula and the fact that we use tax classification and hammer our business community with a higher tax rate would have killed the business community in Holyoke, even with the override passing. Now, politically, that doesn't sound right, but realistically, we sent that message towards Boston through Aaron Vega, our state rep, to the leaders of the legislature. And we were close to getting an answer, and then it got shut down. And we haven't heard that answer yet. And I hear it's the same argument as the redesign of the Chapter 70 formula. Absolutely. Now I'm reading in the paper that Springfield's not worried that they're not getting their new monies from Chapter 70. Are we getting our new monies from Chapter 70 redesign this year, coming year?
Well, it's we're getting close to $5 million this year. I mean, we expect $27 million over the next 7 years to be coming to Holyoke. So we do feel like we are getting. I mean, obviously we believe we would like more. We believe we deserve more, but we will be seeing. We have some gaps that we need to. We've been plugging our budget deficit. We have a structural deficit that we've been covering with Puerto Rico funds that we had after the hurricane. But we believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, Holyoke will be able to meet their annual costs. The schools will be able to meet their annual costs, plus have additional funds to be reinvested in the school. We don't think our situation is as dire as maybe what you read about in Springfield or some other communities that haven't received what they expected to. We think we should be getting more, but we're certainly not as. I think we are seeing more of our fair share than what some of the other communities are reporting. I don't know if you want to add to that, Anthony, at all, but.
Like what you said, we are getting an increase, and Springfield did get a significant increase. It's just that a large portion of that went to some of their charter schools and the empowerment zone that they have within the district.
So, you know, they have a large majority of their middle schools are part of an empowerment zone, and they have a high concentration of economically disadvantaged students in those schools. So when they have a funding mechanism that, and an agreement with the empowerment zone that says any Chapter 70 money that you do get, you got to pass it through to us. So while Springfield saw, I believe it was like a $27 million increase or so, a large portion of that went to the empowerment zone, and there was very little left over for the rest of the public schools. But we don't have a situation like that, so every increase that we do get, the charter schools will get a portion of it, but it's not as drastic as what Springfield experienced this year.
Thank you. You have answered my question. Before I recognize Councilor Murphy, the issue of getting to the point of knowing what the true cost of any project is going to be is how long will it take us to get to that on this particular project. And I think it was, I'm sorry, I forgot who spoke, and it might have been Dennis who spoke, that, you know, we're so far down the road in terms of part of a design. Location is different, but what needs to be done?
Well, I mean, to Dennis's point, I mean, there's a lot of work that's already been done. That's been really good work. I think there were a lot of really smart people, you know, that were part of the committee that, you know, I think I think it was a strong plan. Again, the point about how it was financed is you know, that plan wasn't as strong, but the plan in terms of the design of the school was, I think, very well thought out. The MSBA would never have approved the plan if they didn't think it was a fiscally responsible plan in terms of just like the cost relative to other projects, or if they thought that it was not educationally sound. You know, again, the MSBA has been very clear in the conversations. Mike Sullivan has been a part of it. They've communicated to me, the mayor, that they are very interested in supporting Holyoke, and they're interested in accelerating as quickly as possible. That being said, there's still a process. So while, you know, in a typical situation, it does take 3-4 years to go through, I think they're willing to work with us and try to get it to support us to move forward as quickly as possible. But of course, you know, they know that there's going to be input from the community, and if there's a new building committee, that's got to be a part of it. But they understand that we've been at this for a long time, and to the extent that we can get ourselves aligned and we can become united and cohesive around a plan, there's an appetite to want to get this through as quick as possible. You know, I would suggest there is a lot of really good work done, and I hope that the folks who sit around the table will see that, and certainly take the parts of the plan that you know, are in the best interest of what kids need. So they have said that the two communities they're most interested in supporting right now are the two gateways that are in the pipeline, are Lynn and Holyoke.
And Doctor, just two more things real quick.
Sure.
Our city council right now in our ordinance committee is working on a building committee design that we think, you know, would suit purposes of a lot of things we've heard this evening and a lot of things that have been discussed over the past 6 months. I'm not sure how quick that may be coming out. They've had at least 2 meetings on it, but we're meeting on next Tuesday, April 10th, full city council. March 10th. March 24th and March 7th. The deadline's March 8th. April 8th. Kevin, it's been a long night. April 8th is the deadline. Do we have until the 7th to take our vote?
I would think so, Whitney. You would feel that as long as we get it, we can get it to them the next day if there was support for it, yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
We would just need confirmation from the clerk in a certified manner.
Okay. Is this in response to the ordinance committee?
Yes.
Okay,
The
can I just
ordinance-
recognize Councilor Bacon and...
Thank you. The ordinance committee will be taking up the study committee order on March 17th. It has been sent to legal for legal form since December. We've been simply waiting for the legal form to move forward so that the committee can be appointed and get to work. So it doesn't need to be slow-walked anymore.
And this is our version of a committee which may or may not replace the mayor's version, or it may mold.
It could be decided
merge
that,
together. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be decided that would end up being the building committee.
And which is yet to be out of our control, but it could happen. Councilor Murphy.
Okay, so, first of all, I'm going to be in favor of doing some request, but I want to make sure that what we send out, and maybe I'm wrong, but to me, we need to get more information about whatever we're going to do in terms of finance. Is it going to be totally valid? Clearly, the mayor believes that we can afford it. Then the mayor should be here, or someone, the finance team should be in here explaining to us which plan we can afford. And the fact that we've got 2 plans that are out there, I think that's a bonus. We got some things that I think are realistic improvements to the school department and to having kids go into a school building that's nice. And we have a pretty good idea what it costs. Obviously, there's an inflationary cost to it. So I'm all in favor of moving, but we need to, and I also agree, and I was going to mention the ordinance committee on the 17th. You add all those things together, we get the financial information, we discuss the pros and cons of Peck versus Chestnut Street, we work and get an advisory committee together, and we've got a month and 3 days to be able to do that and provide more information. The worst thing to me that could happen is we go through all this process, we send in a request, and then we find out, because we don't have the information in front of us now, that in fact we can't afford it. So we've gone through the process, we've built up hope, we've said, okay, we're going to do these kind of things, and then we say, guess what, we can't afford it. Let's get the financial information in front of us. I hope that's going to provide us with confidence that we can afford and not be detrimental to other city services, because that's a valid argument as well. We need to make sure we can do it all, but we need to do it all. But that information, it's the finance committee. Let's get financial information. Let's get the detail. Let's get the information on the proposed income from the cannabis industry and other factors that are out there. I've had people tell me that's going to be $3 million. I've had people tell me it's going to be $1 million. I've had people tell me we don't know. But whatever we do know, let's get that information in front of us. And I have no problem, as I filed the original order, to earmark a good portion of that for capital improvements and for stabilization fund, and then for general expenses. We can do all those things and have a good plan that can get widespread community support, and know that eventually, in the next few years, we're going to have a new school and we're going to be comfortable paying for it. And I don't think there's a rush, but I do think we need to get it done, and I think it needs to be top of the agenda.
Any further discussion? The only motion on the floor was to discuss this matter. Is there any thoughts? Councilor Bartley?
I'll be very brief, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again, Joe, for running a good meeting. I'd like to table it. I'm not going to make that motion until, and the reason I say that, because we've got at least 3 city council meetings between now and April 8th. Obviously, we're not going to be ready for March 10th, so there'll be two full city council meetings. There's going to be at least 1 finance committee meeting between now and then. Probably a few of them. I'm kind of tired right this second. That's point number 2. Point number 3 is we're going to hear from another part of this constituency, the teachers, on March 9th. I think I'd like to hear from them, Joe, gentlemen, first. They're stakeholders. I think they have something important to say. Whether it's relevant to this vote, I don't know yet. We just heard tonight, I had two new pieces of information tonight, very exciting. One, we heard Commissioner Riley's coming to town on Friday. That's exciting news. Heard that tonight for the first time, 7:54 p.m. Good news. Second of all, I heard that ordinance is going to take up and the order filed by the Ward 5 councilor on March 17th. I think that's good news. And then so with all that being said, I don't really think we're desperate to take this vote tonight. So I just like the committee's consideration for that. Thank you.
Personally, I think Councilor Murphy has asked, he set the bar high, but I think he's asked some questions that if we can get some answers would be helpful. Again, though, I don't think we're gonna get the true, can never get the true finances until we know what is being designed and what the cost of the actual project is. But we can answer not just the schools, but we can work on the incoming revenues with the assessors and the tax collector, I believe. But there's room to get some more answers. Is there any other discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to table.
No, second
Motion
that.
made, second to table. There is no discussion on that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So moved.
Motion to
Motion
adjourn.
carried, 3-1. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous.